thing. 3, 2,
Hang on.
1.
Sorry.
Hang on.
Abort.
Abort.
I hit a button and the screen went off of my middle monitor here. We are streaming now. Hopefully, let's see. Let me make sure before we go any further.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, we got excellent connection. All right.
3, 2, 1. Record. All righty, Roo. Sync time. 3, 2, 1, 0.
Zero.
Well, since we're not in Discord, I'm going to shut off my Discord. Someone may want to monitor it for comments during the show. I've been having some problems with this machine freezing. I don't
Telegram
know why.
causes that to happen on mine. So
what version of Telegram are you using?
I've got an i7 6th gen or 8th gen 2016 and 16 gigs of RAM. It shouldn't be doing that on the little stuff I run.
I got 16 cores with a Ryzen 7 and 32 gigs of RAM, and I still get hiccups like that.
Damn, we're just going to have to switch to Windows.
You're right. Windows Cast.
We can talk about Mint.
Have you got a moment to talk about Linux?
It's funny.
I was wearing that shirt yesterday.
We start streaming, and all of a sudden, everybody wants to come through this room that I'm in. It's been quiet for hours, and then suddenly it's Grand Central Station.
Well, I need to shut my dryer off. Hang on.
Whew. Well, I've been a bit sleepy. I just got up from a nap, so I hope I can keep my lips moving.
that earlier and then got sidetracked.
All right. So I'm doing this today.
Yep, go ahead.
Welcome to mintCast, the podcast by the Linux Mint community for all users of Linux. This is episode 391. This is episode 391.5, recorded on Sunday, the 10th of July, 2022.
Glad to be off the road again. I'm Bill.
Musically speaking, I'm Moss.
In the middle of Swassville, I'm Joe.
Feeling like I'm losing my head, I'm Norbert.
First up in the news, Mint is coming. Leonard Pottering has left the building. Vim speaks a new language. Web apps come to GNOME 43. Fedora lets Flatpak out of jail and wants to talk. GDK 5 is dropping the X. Linux gets Siri or Cortana or Corolla. In security and privacy, CISA sounds the alarm and Firefox strips. Then in our wanderings, Bill repaves his omen, Moss goes back to school, Joe is still in 3D. And Norbert is typing.
Not prepared.
In our innard section, we will be discussing the different services that we pay for on a monthly basis or a continuous basis. And finally, a feedback and a couple of suggestions. First up, the news. Linux Mint news. This is from the Linux Mint blog. Systemd OOM will not be added to Mint 21 at the present time. Home directory encryption continues to be available in the installer. The decision was made to keep OS Prober enabled by default to guarantee proper dual boot detection out of the box. WebP support was added to Xviewer and Thumbnailers. Blueman 2.3 is in and replaces Blueberry, which might be helpful because Blueberry's terrible. In rsync mode, time shift now calculates the required space for the next snapshot and skips it if performing that snapshot leads to less than 1 gigabyte of free space on the disk. We talked about the updates to Mint Update last episode, and in later news, all ISOs of the Mint beta have to date been faulty and are rejected. Work continues. I'm excited to see that bit about Blueberry being gone, and hopefully Blueman 2.3 is an improvement.
I
If you-
know only anecdotally that Bluetooth tends to be a bit of a hit or miss situation on Linux, period. But it seems like we're getting a little bit of progress with these things. I've never really had much trouble, but I don't use a lot of Bluetooth on the desktop much.
See, when you first connect something using Bluetooth, it works just fine. But most things have a sleep mode or something like that. And whenever it goes to sleep and then comes back is when most people experience the problems.
Now,
Okay, Norbert?
Leonard Pöttering, creator of systemd and Pulse Audio, has left Red Hat and joined Microsoft. This is from 9 to 5 Linux. And Leonard Pöttering is a German software engineer who has, I think, at this point, he's one of the most well-known contributors to Linux. He is most well-known for creating systemd and Pulse Audio. And in a June 5th surprise announcement, Leonard Pöttering has left Red Hat, following a decade and a half there. And it turns out he has joined Microsoft and but he is continuing his work on systemd. While some may not always align with his views or approaches to handling some things. Okay, I think this is better done with one's own words. So I'm not sure if there's a lot more to this news at this point. Most sources that I've heard mention this, they mostly just share their own opinions. And well, systemd is one of the most widely used and also one of the most controversial pieces of software that Linux systems use. But when I say most controversial, I think it's just a vocal minority criticizing it.
he's definitely
Mostly,
going to continue work on systemd in spite of this career change. In fact, I think there's been a commit by him since then. So I'm not sure if it's a storm in the teacup. It's strange, but it's not as strange nowadays as it would have been 5 years ago or so to see something like this.
With the economy the way that it is right now, I mean, you really have to go where the money is. So I'm not going to be mad at anybody that does something that they find is best for themselves or their family.
Yeah.
Well, he's
And
going
to
to
be
continue
fair-
working on Avahi and Pulse Audio, although that's being phased out. Microsoft just needed someone that knew the system, and Leonard has proven over the years he knows it as well as anybody. And over the years, he's taken more flack from the Linux community than anybody, and that is probably not fair to him.
And to be fair, Microsoft is contributing to Linux quite a lot nowadays.
They're
So
huge
if he can continue contributing to systemd, or even leading, is he still the lead developer of systemd? If he can continue doing that pretty much uninterrupted, I'm not sure if this will be of any negative impact on Linux.
Well, like the article said, Microsoft currently shows 663 job postings open mentioning Linux. So they are looking to work more in Linux.
Yeah, that's interesting. They probably have more Linux jobs open than Red Hat does. I'd have no data to back that up, but it's interesting. Ready to move on? Vim 9.0 drops bombshell with new scripting language. This is from Make Use Of. While Vim already had a scripting language, Vim 9 script makes some changes to how comments, functions, and variable assignments work. While most users will want to wait until their distribution's package manager updates Vim, Unix/Linux users eager to try the new version can download the source code from the download page and compile it. Bram Moulinar, I apologize, said that Vim 9 script programs had their execution speeds boosted up to 100 times over the older scripting language. This is achieved by compiling commands for efficient execution.
Anyone here use Vim?
No, but there's still a lot of Vim power users out there.
Yeah. It was one thing
Vim,
that
VI,
Vim,
Emacs, whatever.
Vim is powerful with that scripting because Vim has a, gosh,
Yeah, well, once you really learn Vim, I mean, I've seen people use it and just, it's absolutely insane how quickly they can get through a file and make specific changes and just do whatever they want in Vim. But yeah, it's not for me.
how
but I
many
can
times have
see how
you
this would
gone
be
into
awesome.
the Etsy folder and you've done some pretty complicated changes to a config file somewhere, and then you go to save it and you only then realize that you did not open that file as root, and so everything you just did on Nano is for nothing. Well, Vim's got a workaround for that, where you
Always
can
do sudo nano.
yeah,
Nano has
but
the-
it happens though. You forget the sudo, and then with something like Nano, to the best of my knowledge, I'm sure there's workarounds out there, but Vim's got a way to append a certain command, and then you can save your work right there from the interface that you're already on.
Doesn't Nano
Which,
also give you a warning when you're not as root when you should be?
I mean, yeah, if you're,
Let me try that.
Only when you go to save it.
it'll say read only at the top.
Oh, I just opened FS tab without root, and by default there's a bright red warning at the bottom which says it's unwritable. So
I'm not
sure
sure if
it's,
every
mixed
distro
contribution.
does that.
I know it didn't
Well,
used
Fedora
to.
does. Fedora does at least.
Yeah, I think that's got to be turned on in the config or something. I don't think Arch does that. In Arch, you'll get a thing at the top saying read only. But in spite of that, I know I've done it, and I've heard other people lament that they've done it.
Yeah, it happens.
So that's the one useful thing Vim has. But that being said, I still tend to use Nano more often, just because it's
So much simpler.
yeah.
I've been getting by with Nano, but recently I tried something else, and I may be switching to it, which is not Vim. No Remax.
Joe?
More on that later on.
Okay. Moving on then. GNOME 43 adds support for web apps and Flatpaks. We're still 2.5 months away from the final GNOME 43 release, but we wanted to share some exciting new features you'll be enjoying this fall, as well as some of the improvements implemented so far. First of all, GNOME Software 43 is getting support for web apps with a focus on PWAs. That's Progressive Web Apps. In addition to supporting web apps, GNOME 43 also brings improved support for Flatpak apps, as the Graphical Package Manager and App Store are now capable of displaying file system permissions requested by Flatpak apps. Moreover, GNOME Software 43 features new touch gestures for swiping back in the shell, a new Other Apps by Author section on the App Details page, a new Available for Distro section on the Overview page, improved caching of download metadata notifications, and mouse navigation of app screenshots. Second of all, GNOME Settings, also known as GNOME Control Center 43, is getting a new device security section in the privacy settings that will display the security status of your hardware generated by the FWUPD project and hardware configuration changes, such as HSI security level and secure boot status. Users will be able to choose between the 3 pre-configured security levels for their hardware, like minimum, basic, or extended protection. Well, that seems pretty straightforward. Always good to have more support for web apps and Flatpaks. And I do like that they are providing the permissions when you go look at the application instead of when you're trying to install the application.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Web apps are something that when I switched to Linux, I was using Chromium, and I could just add any website to the app grid, and it will open as a web app. And switch to Firefox. Progressive web apps are the single most missed feature, at least, I mean, by me. So I'm not sure if you will be able to do this via any browser, or it will be like something that you do with the Epiphany, the GNOME browser.
I don't remember what the application is, but a couple of releases back, Mint came out with an application to basically turn anything into a web app, any web page. And you could do it using, you had to go in and manually change it because it starts out as Firefox, but you can go in and switch it so that it will do Chrome instead.
Maybe. Lately, I've just transitioned to using everything in a browser, like in one single Firefox window, because I assume it's more, it's less.
Yeah, it looks like it's actually called web apps. It's called web apps. Run websites as if they were apps.
So lately, you even use Microsoft Teams and Discord and even Zoom, everything in a browser tab. I have them pinned so they don't take up as much space. I think it's convenient.
Yep, I use a lot of pinning and I use a lot of one tab.
Okay, GTK5 might drop X11 support, says GNOME Dev. From the Register, Emmanuel Bassi opened a discussion last week on the GNOME project's GitLab instance that asked whether the developers could drop X11 support in the next release of GTK. We have a link in the show notes. That's really all that was in the article.
Yeah, X11, as much as I like using it because of, everything that you can do with it, it really is dead. I mean, not a whole lot of updating or new features, but then again, I don't know if Wayland is completely there yet. So
not yet, but you should keep in mind that GTK4 is just now starting to get adopted, and GTK3 came out, I think, almost 10 years ago. So I assume there will be at least another 5 years before we get GTK5. Before we see any of GTK5. And so that gives another 5 years, at least, I think, maybe more, for Wayland to improve. So
yeah,
I'm
but they've been
personally
trying to push out
for
Wayland
this.
now for more than a decade. So
Yes, but in the last 2 years, I would say we had more results or more advancements on that towards that than in the previous 10 years. So I'm pretty optimistic. I've been using mainly Wayland since I switched to Linux. And even when I first time I saw in the login manager when it says GNOME on Xorg, I didn't know what it was, and I read it as GNOME on Zorg, like it was some sort of villain's name from a sci-fi, Zorg. So anyway, well then I wanted to share my screen on Discord, and it didn't work. So that's one of the reasons why I just gave up on using Discord as an app and moved it to using it in a browser, because it seems to be a better experience in some cases. And I'm obviously still using Xorg, XFC on my NVIDIA desktop, but I did get Sway working and GNOME Wayland working as well, and didn't have that many issues, so I'm pretty optimistic. We need to also rely on NVIDIA creating a driver that better supports Wayland altogether. But I think in 5 years we will most likely be there where at the point where it's perfectly usable on any device. So I'm not really worried about this. If they do choose to drop X11 support, that's going to further drive VLAN adoption.
Okay. You're up next, Norbert.
Fedora proposing to allow unrestricted access to FlatHub. This is from Phoronix. To this point, Fedora out of the box has been restricted to a filtered subset of FlatHub packages, which is what when you see the Fedora remote, which is called just Fedora, that's what this is. However, Legal has now cleared Fedora 37 for allowing unfiltered /unrestricted access to FlatHub, allowing a far greater selection of Flatpaks to become available on Fedora. There is some possible opposition to this change in its current form, though, because Flatpaks have a higher priority over RPMs within GNOME software. So this change may run into some problems unless GNOME software is altered in its behavior around Flatpaks versus Fedora RPMs. There is also some concern over some FlatHub packages not being built from trusted, high-quality third-party sources. So the first thing that comes to my mind is what Elementary OS did with them having their own remote that only has verified packages that met certain criteria that they have established for their system. But as far as I know, as far as I think I know, Fedora having only certain Flatpaks by default is mainly due to legal reasons, mainly like libraries that, for example, playing media relies on, that Red Hat didn't have all the rights to include and ship in Fedora so far. This is the same reason why RPM Fusion exists, and I'm not sure. I mean, if they can do this with FlatHub, that's great, because I would argue that nowadays, if you have FlatHub, you don't have much for RPM Fusion, at least as an average user. If you are using the RPM of Firefox, you might benefit from adding RPM Fusion. But if you, for example, switch to using the Flatpak of Firefox, maybe this is if it's more reachable for Fedora to do than having RPM Fusion integrated, I think they should absolutely go for this. And GNOME software preferring Flatpaks over RPMs, that might also not be that much big of a problem. At least in my experience, Flatpaks work more or less flawlessly on Fedora nowadays.
Yeah, I think from an average, just end user perspective, there's really no difference between, you open up GNOME software and you look for your package and then you install it. I don't know how many people are using Linux that are not at least somewhat aware of these things, but for conversation's sake, imagine that there is a subset of people like that. From their point of view, what difference does it make if it's a Flatpak or an RPM?
But I would assume that there are more people who know what the majority of Fedora users, at least, must know what this is.
I would think so too, but I think Flatpaks are so good at this point. Like you said, they're just fine. They work pretty much. I mean, the only downside to them is maybe slightly larger download size because it's coming with some dependency type stuff, But
yes,
other
but
than that,
they also share a lot of dependencies. So the more Flatpaks you have, the smaller the downloads become.
Yeah.
I also don't have many complaints about Flatpak, at least on GNOME. They work great. On Sway, which is a WL roots, based window manager, I don't currently use them because I found that the integration is not as seamless, and I had some problems with, for example, Flatpaks not being able to launch and rendering issues. But I still prefer plan to going back to them on my laptop because they are just. I mean, most of the stuff that I was using as a Flatpak, which is basically Discord, Slack, Zoom, I just use in a browser now. So I'm not sure if I even need those Flatpaks on my laptop. I obviously use Flatpaks on my desktop because they're just. I still use Flatpaks on my desktop because they're just great and convenient. But it also depends on what desktop environment you're in. Because Fedora is using GNOME by default, I think they just should. I don't think there should be any problem.
I've gotten to the point where I'm choosing them over AUR packages on Arch. If there's something out there I need that would be normally would have been an AUR download, compile, and install, the Flatpak works just as well, and it's just as up to date. And so
Yeah, but are you installing from the command line, or are you using the installer, the FlatHub, or the GUI for that?
On one laptop that's running XFCE, I'll use the terminal, but the other one is running Plasma, so I use Discover. It's the only thing. Discover is just set up on Arch to keep Flatpaks up to date and search for and install Flatpaks, and then the stuff that comes from the KDE store that are plugins and things for the Plasma desktop. That's what I use Discover for.
It's interesting.
Yeah,
because
I always get my files from FlatHub, and then I use the terminal to install them.
It's just it's.
You go to FlatHub to do window shopping, basically.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you download them by terminal.
Yeah. Because a simple, once you've got it, it's just FlatHub update, and which I've got scripted away.
It is a little confusing because you go to FlatHub and it says install, and all it really does is download. You have to then go somewhere else to install it, and I just think it's easier to use terminal.
I just kind of consider it like I know what you're saying. At first, I thought it might have been more like that OpenSUSE thing where it actually has binary compatibility right there from the website, and you can install packages. I don't know if OpenSUSE still does that or not. They used to, but I think it's a matter of just your interpretation, I suppose. People probably do go on there and expect that button to just install the package. Maybe they should make
OpenSUSE has these reference files that you can download that will add repositories. Are you referring to those? I tried those, and
no, you could actually go to their package manager website and literally hit an install button, and it would install onto your system. It executed binaries to
run
the package manager.
The one-click install. I've tried those. They're the same thing that I mentioned, because if you want to download something that's not in the repos, that basically, as far as I know, just adds the repo and then installs it. It sometimes it's hit or miss, because for me, when I wanted to install something, it tried to add a bunch of repositories that are not needed. I asked it about it on the OpenSUSE Telegram. They did say that they may be thinking about deprecating this feature because it's not very reliable. Yeah. At least that was my takeaway from it. But
I hadn't used it in years. But in Fedora's case, FlatHub really, there's always been a solution, but FlatHub is kind of the answer to all, the legality issues with Fedora being a US-based distribution, and they have to be a little bit more careful about the type of multimedia stuff that they put into it. And FlatHub just kind of, they made it easy to get RPM Fusion, I suppose, but FlatHub just makes it brainless. Just get your stuff from there and not even worry about it.
Yes, but it's still a case of shipping a repository that has those libraries. So I'm not sure if I understand how different including FlatHub is from including RPM Fusion, because you're still including a repo that has those libraries.
I think I'd just go to FlatHub and read the instructions. But, yep. All right, moving on.
Okay. Fedora announces Corolla, a smart assistant for Linux. From Fedora Magazine, Fedora is getting a new personal voice assistant, PVA. Marius Schwartz writes, the first thing people often ask is, why did you name it Corolla? This is a common misconception. Corolla is not the project name, it's the keyword the PVA reacts to by default. It is similar to Alexa or OK Google, for those who are familiar with those products. You can configure this keyword. You can also configure other things such as your location, which applications to use by default when opening media files, what card DAV server to use when looking up contact information, etc. These settings can be personalized for each user. Some of them can even be changed by voice command, such as the name, the default TTS engine, and the default apps.
So then what is the name of the project?
In 2021, I read an article about the speech-to-text system Vosk and started to play a bit with it. The installation was easy, but there was no use case except for writing what one said down to the screen. A few hours and 100 lines of Java code later, I could give my PC simple commands. After a few more days of work, it was capable of executing more complex commands. Today, you can tell him, her, it to start apps, redirect audio streams, control audio and video playback, call someone, handle incoming calls, and more. If you have a smart home, which I haven't, you can even switch on the light in the kitchen. But back to why I chose Corolla. It was the most recognizable by the STT system I was using at the time. Note, this PVA has no English translations yet because it was developed in German. I will use rough translations here, which should work once someone helps with translating the config. There are videos out about Corolla which show these kind of interactions in reality. For now, because a few dependencies are unavailable from Fedora Linux's default repositories, you will need to install the system manually, but don't be afraid. It is all described in the read.me and is pretty simple. And I don't know the answer to that question. I was just reading the article. Do you? Norbert?
Nein. Ich weiß es
Nine.
nicht.
9, 10, 11, 12.
Let's call it Fedora Voice Assistant.
Well, there is actually one science fiction TV show I'm having where they actually named an AI Cortana. I'm going, Windows much?
No, Cortana is an AI in the Halo universe, and Halo is a game developed by Microsoft. So Microsoft named their assistants. Or did I not get the sarcasm?
Well, whether Cortana was named after Halo or Halo was named after Cortana is still Windows.
Ooh, what came first, the Microsoft or the? Well, that's a stupid question.
The Microsoft or the Microsoft? They just named the voice assistant after the voice assistants inside their game.
I don't get it though. What's wrong with the name Corolla?
Toyota.
Oh, okay. So the implication being they'll get sued because they name a piece of software the same thing as a car.
Is it Corolla or is it Carola?
That's Corolla.
That's Corolla in German. In Toyota, Corolla is a C-O-R-R-O-L-A.
Yeah.
C-O-R-O-L-L-A, yeah. It shouldn't be a problem. I'm just going, okay, so they picked a name. Okay.
They picked a name that they seem to encourage people to change to whatever they want, which is, I think it's a nicer approach. But then I know that there has been and still is a problem around Alexa. I shouldn't say that out loud.
Yeah, that's a big no-no.
Sorry.
As another announcer calls it, LadyTube.
Okay.
Or Lady Cylinder.
So take two. So I know there's a controversy around Amazon's voice assistant's default name. I don't think default name, yeah, because people who have that name have a harder time in their everyday life because of that. So at least Cortana is from a fictional universe, and it's not, as far as I know, it's not a common name. There might be people out there named Cortana.
I'm sure there is.
Which I also shouldn't say out loud, but I'm not sure how many Linux users would have Cortana set up.
And if
how many Windows users actually have Cortana set up?
That's like the first thing you turn off, isn't it, when you're doing the install?
You don't even let it turn on.
Considering if you're at all interested in security, the first thing you turn off.
or just irritated by the sound of the condescending voice. Who wants to read the security and privacy?
That means
On
we're
to
done with the
security
news.
and privacy. CISA sound alarm about high severity bug in all Linux distros. A high severity Linux vulnerability capable of granting abusers root access to target endpoints is being exploited in the wild, researchers have warned. The flaw is found in Polkit's PC exec component, which can be found in pretty much all major Linux distributions. Tracked as CVE 2021-4034, the flaw is dubbed PwnKit and is described as a memory corruption bug. It allows threat actors full root privileges on Linux systems with default setups. What's more, 3 actors can exploit the bug without leaving a trace on the compromised endpoint. The current version of pkexec doesn't handle the calling parameters count correctly and ends trying to execute environment variables as commands. The NIST security advisory reads. An attacker can leverage this by crafting environment variables in such a way it'll include pkexec to execute arbitrary code. When successfully executed, the attack can cause a local privilege escalation, given unprivileged users administrative rights on the target machine. Even though security researchers are warning that the flaw is being abused in the wild, they did not say who the threat actors are or who they are using the flaws against. Yes, I skipped a bunch of it. It was getting long. And I felt like we had covered the important parts for the parts that I had read. What it was.
Well, I figured
was
we might have a
vulnerable.
short show, so we might want a longer security.
Yeah. Now, I can always read the rest of it.
Nah, move on.
TLDR.
The rest of it's in the show notes.
All right, then. A new Firefox privacy feature strips URLs with tracking parameters from bleeping computers. Mozilla Firefox 102 was released today with a new privacy feature that strips parameters from URLs that are used to track you around the web. Numerous companies, including Facebook, Marketo, Unedited, and HubSpot, utilize custom URL query parameters to track clicks on links. With the release of Firefox 102, Mozilla has added a new query parameter stripping feature that automatically strips various query parameters used for tracking from URLs when you open them, whether that be by clicking on a link or simply pasting the URL into the address bar. Once enabled, Microsoft will now strip the following tracking parameters from URLs when you
Mozilla.
click on links or paste a URL into the address bar. And those are in the show notes. They're fun to read. Olytics, Oli underline Ank underline ID equals gets stripped. Oli underline Anon underline ID equals gets stripped, etc., etc. You've got Drip, Vero,
Yeah.
HubSpot, Marketo, and Facebook.
Moss has Microsoft on the brain, but he meant Mozilla.
What did I say? Microsoft Firefox?
No, you said once enabled, Microsoft will.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Bravo for this is the stuff we want Mozilla doing right here. This is the stuff we want our browser doing. Excuse me.
I'm sorry. I was sponsored by Microsoft to say that.
I'm sure.
It'll be all right. But yeah, this is the kind of thing we want them doing, because there's enough people out there that are sneaking things in ways that people are not fully aware, fully accustomed to thinking about, and this is one of those things. So it's good.
I'm sure they'll add more as they find ones.
Yeah,
I know that we've talked about this on previous shows, or maybe some other shows have also talked about this too, because they've been planning this for a while, and I'm glad it's finally been implemented. The stripping out of the trackable information.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
Nope.
That's all we got in security.
All right, on to the bi-weekly wanderings. And Bill, you're up first.
Well, this week I decided to nuke and pave my HP Omen laptop. I've actually got two HP laptops. They're both running Arch. Although the more powerful one that's upstairs in the living room, that's actually dual booting Windows 11 with Arch Linux. And
That was Mint Arch, right?
well, I needed Arch at one time. There's things I still like about Arch, but when it's time to sit down and
Bill,
do
you run Arch?
I do. I think I
Okay.
might have mentioned that.
Okay, just checking.
But I thought I had to, otherwise I'd be fined by the whatever open
Torches
source
and
police.
pitchforks are on the
they'd
way.
be after me. Okay, so I made this decision because that machine had a 1 terabyte NVMe Samsung 980 Pro. That's what's got the operating systems on it. And then I also stuck a big old 2 terabyte Samsung 960 Evo just for storage. Now, those are expensive hard drives, and I wasn't even coming close to using all that space. The reason I opted for that in the beginning was because I was going to do some work with virtual machines. And then once I started doing podcasting, my time for that just went out the window. Like I said, these are expensive storage devices, so not making use of them was bothering me a bit. Now, the oldest of my kids still living with me, he's got this really beastly Acer gaming laptop, and that's got provisions on the motherboard for 2 NVMe drives as well as an SSD slot. And he was constantly running into trouble where he had to delete games to make space because he had I think it's like a 128 gig NVMe, but then he had a 1 terabyte Toshiba spinning Rust drive on it. And I didn't know it was a spinning Rust until I opened it up. I just knew it was 1 terabyte. And so I thought, well, I was wanting to replace a screen on that Omen anyway, so I went ahead and swapped those out and put that 2 terabyte into his. But then I was left with a problem because I didn't want to put the 1 terabyte spinning Rust back into mine. So I did some swapping around with the production machine down here. I had a 500 gigabyte 980 Evo in there that I was using just to store stuff on it. And so I switched that out, put a 2 terabyte Seagate FireCuda into that, and the only thing that's doing is just storage. It doesn't really need to be fast.
Yeah. The FireCuda is a spinning disk as well. It just has a section for caching that is an SSD. For those that don't know,
yeah,
I like the FireCuda. It's a nice balance between spinning disk and SSD if you want larger amounts of storage.
And that's it. I had it sitting around doing not much of anything, and it wasn't a cheap hard drive. I'm not sure how useful the flash storage is on it, how well it gets utilized as a regular storage device. If it was being used as a boot device, it might come in more handy, but still it's a 2 terabyte drive. So I've got more storage space, while be it slightly smaller or slightly slower down here. It doesn't really matter. It's just going to be where the media files reside for our shows and things like that. So he's happy. He's actually able to keep his games on his machine now and not have to erase them. And I'm happy that it's getting some use because, like I said, those 2 terabyte Samsung SSDs are darn near $300. It was uneventful, that whole process. Though it did require me to nuke and pave my system because I had a kind of a complicated ButterFS Lux encryption thing going on. and you remove a hard drive from that whole layout, and it's just easier to start from scratch. But I'd been wanting to do that anyway. All right, so about a year ago, I ordered a replacement 1080p screen. I don't know if people might have heard me lament about that 4K screen that it had on there. It's a 15-inch laptop that came with a 4K screen, and that's about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. It's great for gaming. You do get quite a bit more resolution when you're playing your games, but when you're doing desktop stuff, it's a less than perfect experience, because you end up having to zoom it to the point where you might as well just had 1080p or 720p to begin with, and you don't get the same, for whatever reason, you don't get the same clarity of picture as you would if you had just a native 1080p, or at least that was my experience. When I originally ordered that screen, I tried to swap it out, only to find out that there was a slight difference between the plug on the wire, and so I had to order a new wire for it. But replacing that was going to require me tearing it apart a little bit more, because the other end of that wire, it's kind of a Y type thing, because it's partially one of the antennas that kind of wraps around the inside of the screen bezel, and then the other end goes into the motherboard. So I had to order one of those. Now those parts are all actually replacements to my daughter's Omen. She's got one that looks just like mine, but it's not quite as powerful, and it's got a 1080p screen. So having her computer there, I was able to just order exactly what I needed. Well, while I had it tore apart to swap those drives out, I went ahead and did the monitor too, and put it in, fired it up. I could not be happier. The experience, it feels faster, and it feels sharper, because it's not being zoomed. It's just using the full native resolution.
So if one of your laptops goes out, is that a bad omen?
Ha ha ha. Good one. Yeah, I've got one. The daughter has one. My oldest boy that's still living here has got one of those Acer gaming. I bought all of these at pawn shop. These are all $1,500. Mine's like a $2,000 Omen. And I don't think I've spent more than $300 for a laptop, because these people don't know what they got. Then the other boy, he's got one of those Asus Republic of Gamer laptops. These are all substantially powerful machines, but you buy them used and you get one heck of a discount, and they were in perfectly good shape. So I was actually looking forward to doing a fresh install and rid the system of cruft that a user like me builds up after a while, because you hear about projects and you try them out, you install them, and they come with all the config files, and then you do things with the files to try different things, and then you end up either moving on from it or just getting rid of it, and then these files are left behind. In the Arch world, you've kind of got this culture that is against nuking and paving, but I don't think there's ever going to be a time where sometimes you're just going to benefit by erasing it and starting it from scratch with a nice clean system that's got all of the modern, because that's the other thing, with Arch, it doesn't update the config files unless you do it yourself, unless you merge those configs yourself, which a lot of people don't do, and I haven't always done it. So as they add different functionality, you might not always have it until you do it nuke and pave. Now I've been happy with Arch, but my time's been limited lately. So this time I went with Endeavor OS. I've used it before in virtual machines, and I had it installed on a thumb drive. that I was using, and I was happy with it that way. But I hadn't tried the KDE version of it, and so I was kind of interested in having a nice, easy to install Arch base with all of the benefits of Arch and very little of the work. It is Arch. Endeavor is Arch, as we know full well, but it just comes with a few GUI tools to do certain tasks that Arch users have been doing in the command line or terminal since the beginning, and it makes it a little bit easier. It was helpful to have these things to get everything up to date and running prior to getting the scripts that I normally use off of my GitHub page. Now Endeavor comes with these scripts that run and check for updates regularly and sends a generic notification that you can't really do anything with. It's just a notification saying that there's updates. And that was something I got rid of because it feels a little silly having an update notification for an Arch system, because there's literally an update every time you look. Because with Arch or anything based on Arch, based directly on Arch, you're going to have updates as the individual commits are sent upstream. So every time, basically, if you run an update 6 times a day, you'll get at least one package each time. So I got rid of that. I can't say that I'm ready to give up the Arch experience forever, but for now I'm happy with the Endeavor experience, because it really makes it easy just to get it up and running. The other thing I liked was that they do a ButterFS install the right way. They actually set up, if you choose ButterFS, it sets up the sub volumes for all the recommended places that you would normally want to do that, and then mounts them correctly in the FS tab file there. So that's one good option with regards to ButterFS and Arch. But that's about all I've got. What you got, Moss?
Well, I discovered that Raspberry Pis are not worth their weight in gold, unlike what some people tell me. My Pi 3B Plus lists on eBay for around $60, although the only exact match I see right now with the Pi Moroni case is 120 plus shipping.
Hold on.
What?
You're telling me your $35 3B Plus is only selling for $60 on eBay?
Well, and with the Pi Moroni case, it's only 120. That's not gold. That's maybe a good grade of silver.
Okay, I'm just checking.
I'm trying to see what else I can do with my Pi 4. Actually, I went looking around and I can't find the Pi 4, but I know it's here. Both Pis are just sitting around. I looked at maybe self-hosting Bitwarden, but it looked like a lot of work just to save $10 a year. I got signed up for teaching this fall, and I got all my online courses done. I just hope I have the energy for teaching plus all my podcasts. It'd sure be nice to have a little bit of extra income coming in. Distro Hoppers is set for July 13th. That's this Wednesday if you're listening to the show live. This time in the early evening. Best healing wishes to Tony Hughes, who's still down with COVID. Since Tony's down, we're doing it in the evening because that's more convenient to Josh and me and Dale. I sent Joe my extra Fire Tab 7 2019 model to see if he could get it to do anything. It's his now. I expect him to send my teeth and Lenovo power supply back soon. And speaking of teeth, I lost my current set of uppers, which is why I sound funnier this episode. I'm lisping a lot more because I don't have the teeth to do my sibilants off of. That's it for me, unless someone wants to make more fun of me or something. Joe?
Well, I did receive the Fire Tab from Moss, and I did get his teeth as well. And I will work on them when I have time. Or when I find my Dremel, whichever comes first. I mean, the other day when Moss told me he had lost his uppers and needed the other ones, I offered to work on them and get them done and sent out the next day. I spent the next like 4 hours trying to find my Dremel and could not find it. So
You
I'm a little stuck.
You said 8 hours.
Whatever, 4 hours, 8 hours. It was a long time that I looked for that Dremel and did not find it. But I will find it, or when I get paid, I'll get another Dremel and I'll get that done and get that sent back to Moss, along with another pair of headphones and that power supply for the Lenovo. Okay. Now that Fire tab was locked by Amazon because it took so long to deliver to Moss that they actually sent him another one. And it's still good hardware, and I really don't want it to go to waste. I understand why they locked it, but why throw it away when it's perfectly good brand new hardware? I have found a set of instructions from XDA developers, and I think it'll do the trick in getting it to work. There's even a hardware method in case you brick the thing while doing the software method. The device may not be able to log into Amazon ever due to the IMEI, but should do well with like Google Apps.
Yeah, I tried to return that one and the one they replaced it with, and just order the brand new model, which just came out the end of June. And they told me to keep them both, and they just give me the refund, and I should wait another month or two to order the new one, because they start getting them back after they send them out, and they can ship me one for cheaper as a whatever.
Yep.
Remanufactured. There we go.
One of the interesting things about the fix from XDA is that it requires you to use Linux. Most of the rooting methods that you'll see anywhere use Odin, which requires you to use Windows. So it's very refreshing to see a fix that requires Linux in order to work. Now, I've also been doing some 3D design and printing, trying to change out the casing for some really cheap Bluetooth headsets. I mean, like $3 a piece Bluetooth headsets, and give them different batteries and different headphone cables. It's been a success so far, but I'm going for a very iterative approach to the improvements that I'm making. I finished up the second model. Well, I finished up the 3D design and printing portion of the second model. I still got to add in the battery and the headphone wires. Like I said, the first one that I did and worked just fine. It was just way too chunky to be useful. And then now the second one, it does look good. The first one took a whole lot of iterations of printing and testing to get everything sized right and fitting. The second one, I was able to measure and print one time, but I was having problems with my 3D printer. So, yeah, I was able to get a good print on that in the end. Now, with the 3D printer, I have switched out the tubing and nozzle and the filament, and I was still getting under extrusion. Now, from what I can see, there was an issue with the extruder gear, and I did order a new one from Amazon, the one with dual gears. It's a $14 fix. I was thinking that my bed was bowed, and that was a $20 replacement, but I didn't order that one. And I'm glad I didn't, because I found out that the problem was actually the X arm again shifting positions. So hopefully now that's fixed. I did get the new gear, and that definitely fixed the under extrusion problem, to the point where I thought I was getting some over extrusion, but that was just because I had turned off cooling at one point to try and fix another issue. So once I turned cooling back on and got it printing with the new extruder gear, everything worked fine. And I verified, looking at the old extruder gear, that the tension arm on it was snapped. So that was indeed the problem. Now, Once it took a long time because I'm also trying out this thing called Gridfinity, and if you do 3D printing and you have a lot of tools, check out Gridfinity. It's actually a cool project. But the thing is it's very a lot of especially the base is very flat to start out with, and you really have to have your printer dialed in to get that type of thing to print. And so I was able to get a 3x4 grid printed out and looking good. And it took a couple of tries to actually get it level, but once I got that X arm tightened so it wasn't wobbling, I was able to get a good flush level and get that to print. And I'm just starting on the Gridfinity stuff. I'm hoping it turns out well. Now, for my next, because I got 6 of those really cheap Bluetooth adapters all at once in a lot for like $3 or $4 each, and the next one's going to be a lot more difficult to do than the last couple of iterations that I did because I was using the original casing. But the next one, I am going to remove the casing and I'm going to 3D print my own push downs for the buttons and have them seated in the casing that I'm going to make, which will allow for it to be overall smaller while still incorporating a larger battery and some type of modularity in connecting the headphones. Now, I was also able to pick up a OnePlus phone from T-Mobile for basically free. I traded in one of my old S3s, the one my son had been using, and got the OnePlus Nord N200. That's something that T-Mobile is offering right now. You basically pay the taxes on it, and then they charge you each month the price of the phone, but then they also reimburse you the price of the phone, and they do that over 24 months. It's definitely not the greatest device in the world, but at the cost, you really can't complain. It has a beautiful screen, and the images are very crisp. It also has a 90 hertz refresh rate. The camera, however, sucks. I was thinking about getting a couple more of them and using multiple angles and OBS to make YouTube videos easier, but the camera is just plain bad. Some of it could be post-processing that could be fixed with proper software, but I don't know. It's really bad. I cannot express how terrible that camera looks. I have put in the camera application that other people suggested, but it still really didn't help all that much. I'm probably going to try out a couple of different things and see how it works with Droid Cam, but I don't have high hopes for the camera quality improvements. Like I was saying, I traded my son's old S3 for the device. I think the cameras are about on par with each other, and while I do like the smaller form factor of the S3, it's getting a bit long in the tooth software-wise. I mean, you couldn't install most applications on it anymore. Even XDA had basically given up on updates for it. The Nord is on Android 11, and I think the S3 ended on like 4.4 for stock. And if I remember right, OnePlus is pretty good about keeping the updates coming. If nothing else, the Nord will make a good MP3 player once I get a good sized micro SD card in there. I still want to order a case and screen protector for it, but I think it's also going to be a good device to use as like a VPN machine. As in, I connect it to a Wi-Fi network, then connect it to a VPN, and then connect it through USB to a laptop and share the network connection. I know this sounds frivolous, but it's actually useful when I need to step away and take my phone with me. It also keeps me from having to reset up the VPN every time I switch computers. So all I have to do is, unplug it from one computer, plug it into the next computer, and say, hey, use this as your internet connection. Now, it's also going to be my backup phone for if my main phone that I use for work every day something horrible happens to it and it becomes unusable, I can just pop out the SIM card from the one, pop it into the Nord, and continue working. Now, while playing around with setting up that Nord, I also pulled out the Pine phone and I reinstalled the Manjaro Plasma on it because I really liked that before. And I still love how you can adjust the scaling to make it look just like a desktop. And that I can install many full desktop applications onto it and just run them like I was sitting at a desktop. And yeah, I'm always going to say that is my favorite feature of the Manjaro Plasma on the Pine phone. And that's pretty much all I've been up to. Unless you guys
Is that
have
a
any
regular
questions.
Pine phone or a Pine phone Pro?
That would be the original Pine phone, so not the Pro. Any other questions? Awesome. Norbert, what you been up to?
I finally got around doing something that I've been meaning to for a couple of months. The university semester has ended, so I took my old laptop and I set it up as a file server, as a home server. For now, for only to be able to reach it from within the home network. And I hooked one of my 2 TB as a hard drives to it, and I've been mostly connecting to it via SSH and mounting its hard drive via SSHFS, which is a bit slower than I hoped. So I will have to look into more efficient ways to do that. But yeah, I had it up and running for a week, and it's running Debian stable, which I still think is one of the best, if not the best, choices for such a purpose. When the only thing I really need for that server to do is be running and be accessible anytime I want it to. And since on a server you don't, and in which case you don't really need feature updates for a system necessarily. I know that a lot of people like to use Debian on the desktop, and I have done so in the past, but after a while, even if it's been not too long since release, I have to say it does kind of feel like the packages are a bit outdated. So, which is why I like Fedora on my desktop. But yeah, I also set it up so that it is connected to VPN at all times, which is something that I find very convenient. I haven't managed to get graphical apps to work via SSH though. So whenever I want to, I know that it's possible because in one of the university courses we used SSH to run a graphical app that was running on the server. But
Yeah, but I'm going to stop you right there because I know what your problem is.
I do have Xorg installed on the server.
Okay. So you are doing X11 forwarding, and
I am doing X11 forwarding. Maybe the problem is that I'm running Sway on my client, but it shouldn't be an issue because when I was when I was doing X11 forwarding from the university server, I was running non-Wayland, and both just use X-Wayland, so it shouldn't be an issue. The error message that I'm currently getting is that it's not able to use a display. I've tried setting it to different values, the display variable. I
actually first run Xhost Plus.
On my client or the server.
I usually do it through Docker, and I usually have to run Xhost Plus on the client. So,
I did that.
Okay. Then I don't know.
Maybe I'm missing something, but that would be great because before, if I wanted to have a browser to go through a VPN and not my whole system, I would just fire up a VPN. But if I could get this to work, I could just have a shortcut that would open up Firefox a Firefox instance from the server via external forwarding. So I wouldn't have to wait for, but I guess I would still have to wait for it to start up because, like I said, SSH seems a bit slow for these purposes. But I would have a more convenient way to do just a single browser window, go through VPN, and yeah, while doing I have a separate shortcut. I did set up passwordless SSH login, so I set up a shortcut on my laptop that when I press it, it just opens up a terminal and automatically logs into my server. So I have a separate. Essentially, it's like I have a separate hotkey for opening a terminal on my client and on my server. And when I mentioned that I've been trying out a different text editor, it's Micro, and I really like it because I have used both Nano and Vim previously. I like Nano, but the key bindings are I find them a bit odd. They're a bit different from anything else I tried. And Micro has very sensible key bindings, I should say. And Micro has very sensible key bindings. For example, you can just cut a line by Control X and paste with Control V, and save with Control S, exit with Control Q, and it has a really easy way to switch between default themes.
So by sensible, you mean WordStar commands?
I'm not sure on Nano. You have to if I want to cut a line, I press Control K and I paste it by Control U, which I'm not sure what the reason, the logic behind it is.
So you're using 1974 commands to do modern copy and paste.
I have a friend who is he's a Nano power user, so I know that I'm not trying to bash Nano, and I do have to say that I've gotten used to these Nano key bindings, so I actually will have to get used to going back to the Control C and Control X, Control V for Micro. But I assume I will also have to alias Micro to Nano because I still just whenever I want to edit something, I still just use Nano because I gotten used to it. Maybe I should alias Nano to not open Nano but give back a message that says use Micro instead.
And I need to revise my comment. It's 1979 commands.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at Micro right here, and it still has the weird Control K to cut a line. And
I know that Control X worked for me. No, which is interesting because in Nano you exit via Control X. So I will have to do a lot of getting used to. But once I do, I think it will be much. But once I do, I think I will like the experience better. I also did something, and I will talk about this quickly because I did talk about it in the previous episode, but I decided to cut it out because it wasn't a very well structured review. I did something I didn't think I would do, and I went ahead and installed Gentoo. And previously we did talk about how. And Bill talked about how he usually just goes to the AUR to build and build packages from there. And what do you say the alternative was that you?
Flatpak.
Oh, so okay, Flatpak.
I mean,
and
are you talking about the way I consume the AUR? Because you've got many.
You eat your AUR?
Well, you've got several helpers, what they call them, that can like go out and get the package build and then just execute that script.
Yeah, but you still get the more or less but you still have to wait for it to build.
Yeah. Which, I mean, depending on how powerful your system is and what type of thing you're installing, because there are some binaries on there. There's nothing stopping somebody from putting a binary and then you install it. Like that's how you get Google Chrome on Arch, as it goes, and it just gets the deb and it strips out all the Debian stuff and then just installs it from there.
And I when I use Arch, I do use a helper. I use Peru, and I actually just install Peru-bin. So I use the precompiled binary of Peru.
Yeah.
At the times, I even went to the chaotic AUR to get whenever for some reason something just failed to build from the AUR. But building packages on Gen 2 is on a whole another level because you basically build all your system from source. And my previous approach to Gen 2 was that I shouldn't have to build anything from source in today's day and age. But I found it to be a very interesting learning experience, and I didn't expect it, but I liked setting up Gen 2. I managed to install it, and the use flags aren't as complicated as I thought. Basically, whenever you build a package, you can have a list of flags system-wide or on package base to include and exclude functionality. For example, if you don't want any Bluetooth functionality to be built into your programs, you just put the flag minus Bluetooth and stuff like that. If I want to have support for PyPire, I just add the flag PyPire. And I set my system up, and I compiled my kernel with the default settings, but my touchpad and touchscreen wouldn't work. So I had to get into the depths of the kernel compile configuration, and I had to find the various switches I had to turn on in order to enable my specific touchscreen and touchpad. And it wasn't that just in the device support enable this specific model of touchpad and touchscreen. I also had to enable some additional stuff. And I set up Sway, my Wayland window manager, and I felt like doing some mad sciencing again, and I wanted to see whether I can compile my system in a way that it has no support for X11, only Wayland. And it is sadly not possible because some packages like Mesa do need to have do have dependencies on X11. But if I wanted to, I could just set the minus X flag for the whole system, compile all the packages that can be built without X11 support to just only work with Wayland. And if I do the same thing with Sway, it won't have X Wayland, so it will not be able to run X11 applications. Is this something that is particularly useful today? Not really. And I never really planned to use this system on a day-to-day basis, but I found it to be an interesting experience. And I also watched a couple of videos about kernel configuration.
I was just getting ready to ask you about that. Did you do your own kernel or did you go with the Gen kernel?
I did my own kernel.
Oh.
Well, first I went with the Gen 2 kernel, but when I said that the touchpad and touchscreen didn't work, that was already my own compiled kernel. But I used for some reason when I just downloaded the kernel sources manually and I ran make and make config, make install, it wouldn't boot from refined. But then I downloaded the sort of kernel builder helper, which they call genkernel, and I ran genkernel with its own default settings that worked. But then my touchpad and touchscreen didn't work. So I ran genkernel with the flag that lets me manually toggle all the switches in the kernel config. And that's where I found the stuff that I found it on a German language forum post. So it was very well hidden in the depths of the internet, but I found the list of options that I had to turn on. And then I went to YouTube and watched a couple of videos about kernel configuration, kernel compilation. The first time I ever seen the kernel config screen was when I tried to install Crocs, which is the long-running rolling resistor that Arch was inspired by. And I realized that I think doesn't matter what system are you on, if you just want to compile your kernel, it will be the same menu for setting it up. So I found, for example, there are specific options that are for AMD or Intel CPUs. So you can, for example, lower system overhead by just, if I have a Intel CPU, just exclude anything that has to do with AMD or NVIDIA. With a modern CPU, that's not really doing. I didn't see any particular improvement in performance other than it was booting way faster. I mean, the default Gen kernel was already booting fast, but after I did follow some of the optimization tips from YouTube. I want to shout out the channel Mental Outlaw, which I follow from time to time. He does some videos on Gen 2 and also privacy and security. After I followed his guide, I noticed that the system was even faster to boot, but while I was using the system, I didn't really notice any difference. So this might be useful if someone wants to, for example, install Gen 2 on a very old computer. But if you have a very old computer and you can install a system that's very lightweight this way, but you also will have a lot more rating while it compiles because of the inherently weaker hardware.
That's the catch
So
22 of it. The
yeah,
benefit, in order to get the benefit of a really narrowed down system that's got nothing more and nothing less than what you absolutely need for that system, it has to be compiled to be tailor fit for that, and compilation on an older machine, it's you almost have to ask yourself, where do you need that optimization the most, you know?
or I guess you could somehow connect it to a
Cross
more
compile
modern
it.
machine. Yeah, not cross compile, because as far as I know, when you install Gen 2, you don't start from scratch. You download a tarball and you extract it, and I think that includes the compiler. So it's the same compiler for any system. So I'm not sure. I think if you compile a package on one machine running Gen 2, you could install that package on another machine. I'm not exactly sure. But if that's the case, you could have like a server for compiling and like and then deploy that compiled package to various machines, which is essentially what distributions do when they put precompiled packages into repositories.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, it was a much better learning experience than I thought, and I think I've even learned some stuff that is not Gen 2 specific, mainly the kernel settings. The kernel has the default kernel configs have like support for up to like r- very high number of CPU threads and GPUs, which is it's not much overhead on modern hardware, but it's still interesting how much you can custom tailor your kernel for your system. And I no longer have Gen 2 in my system because I felt at one point I felt like, okay, I found myself looking for updates again, and on Gen 2, updates are you have to, at one point I even compiled Firefox and LibreOffice, which are the two of the biggest packages, and it was literally like, okay, let me start the installation, and I go to sleep, and when I wake up, LibreOffice is there. So I no longer have Gen 2 on my system, but I didn't wipe it. I took a snapshot as as an IMG file of the partition, and I still have it stored. So if I ever feel like going back to Gen 2, I can go back to the same system. I have to say that while Gen 2 can be very light on system resources like RAM and CPU, it you need to have quite some space because there's a lot of temporary files. Like you have to, in order to be able to compile your kernel, you have to download the kernel sources. If you want to have the kernel sources for multiple versions of the kernel, that's as many times the storage, and there are other temporary files that you have to store. So I ended up storing that on my data partition, not the root partition for Gen 2. And when I moved all those temporary files to the from the root partition, my system was around, I think, 6 or 7 gigabytes, which is not bad. I think it's about on par with an Arch system of the same configuration. So I do see that Gen 2 has enormous potential, but while I did enjoy using it for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, it's not for me as a daily driver. But I do appreciate it a lot more than before I tried it.
It's mostly a learning experience, yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't get
Well,
system D by default with that either. You're kind of a second
yeah,
class
okay,
citizen.
you get OpenRC, and
Yeah.
they have you can choose to use either that or systemd, but I just went with OpenRC because that's what the default is. And I even learned that the OpenRC is developed by the Gen 2 team, which is interesting.
All this talk
So
about Gen 2 got me thinking about Sabayon again, which is no longer active, but has been rolled into Mochaccino OS. And I did a check on that, and they are currently in beta 5. So they're getting close to ready to release.
I often thought that was an interesting, because that was around probably a decade ago or better.
I
And
loved Sabayon. It took
yeah,
longer to update than anything else, but that's because it was it had to go get the binaries that had already been recompiled, but you didn't have to do any compiling, but it still took longer to install a binary than it did other packages.
that was probably a lot of work to keep that distribution going. That
Yeah.
wasn't just a
Yeah, but they have so many cute features in it.
yeah. It was a unique one. I can't think of much of anything out there that's based on Gen 2 in the way that was, where it wasn't just a Gen 2 clone. It had a Gen 2 back end, but they had a lot of their own tooling involved.
Are there a lot of other Gen 2 based distros that have all binary packages?
See, Sabian was the only one that I thought did that at all,
What
honestly.
is the
Well, the latest version is Mochaccino OS, and like I said, it's in beta 5.
Okay.
what
Yeah,
is the benefit of having a Gen 2 based distro that is using binary packages?
You can install Gen 2 without having to compile everything.
Yes,
Well,
but the strength of Gen 2 is that you can tweak how you compile things.
you could still tweak it. You still have the control over, because the thing with Gen 2, other distributions, you try to strip System D out of it and go with something else. You get kind of a half-baked experience. With Gen 2, you have a level of control that's even more granular than what you would get on Arch, where you can literally strip out anything.
Yes, but stripping out system, the results may vary. I This is the reason that I don't really like distributions that are based on a systemd distribution, but they're a derivative that doesn't use systemd, like Dev one for Debian and Artix for Arch. I really like Void for the reason that it's an independent distro that doesn't use systemd by design. So if someone really wants to use a distro that doesn't use systemd, they should go with something like Void or Gen 2. I know that there's a distro that is based on Debian but doesn't use systemd, which is MX Linux, that I think does this approach very well. So if I wanted to use a distro that is not Void or Gen 2 and not have systemd, I would probably go to MX Linux. But the init system is not really a factor that influences my
I think you
decisions
run into a
over
lot of
distros.
difficulties too if you
Yeah.
try to live without it,
Yeah.
because so many things, all your modern projects are
Yeah.
leaning almost
Yeah.
completely against it. You would have to be, if you're going to live without Systemd, you'd have to know how to write these scripts yourself, because not everything is going to have an OpenRC uh, service going on, or whatever other
But
ones out there.
Mochaccino has developed their own program manager that they call Luit, and they're currently available in GNOME, KDE, and Mate.
GNOME is one of the projects that people said some people don't like because it has a hard dependency of systemd, they say, but then GNOME is in the Void repos, and I've tried it and I've used it without a problem, without systemd, so it can be made to work. And I think Gen 2 even has a specific repo or specific config for GNOME to make it work without systemd. But
you just have to write the service files yourself,
yeah.
or the distribution has to. I mean, yeah, there's no technical reason why GNOME can't work with other init systems. It's just not, they're not going to write those service files for you. You got to do it yourself.
Yeah, and on my desktop, I went from a bunch of systemd distros to using Void for a couple of months, and then I went to Arch and Fedora. So I went from a non-systemd distro back to systemd. But the fact that they do or do not have systemd has nothing to do with my decisions. I just went with Fedora because I wanted stability on my desktop, and I'm still running Void on my laptop because I just like to tinker with it. But yeah, it's interesting, and I think a lot of people who don't like systemd, some people say that it does too much, but the fact that it's not monolithic means that you can just install the zip that you want and exclude the pieces that you don't want to have.
Sounds like we need to do an innards on this topic.
Systemd, yeah.
Maybe.
Or whatever. We've been talking about a few things that were way beyond innards, but they were way beyond biweekly wanderings, but they'd make good innards.
Yeah. But no, I just used System D as an example of something that would be a benefit of anything based on Gen 2. You just have that level of control over the system, and it feeds into the tribal nature of Linux as a whole. You've got people that want to use something Gen 2 based just because, and so
Which sort of leads me to the other thing that I think that some people, some of the systemd, that some people who don't like systemd just they might not necessarily have a problem with systemd itself, but they might not like the fact that it's so widespread, which means less choice. But you do have a lot of distros that don't use systemd, but that still doesn't mean that but there's still the fact that the more and more distros rely on systemd, the more and more you see projects that might have hard dependencies on it.
yeah.
Which might
Well,
or might
in
not have
20 years, Leonard Pottering will be seen as a visionary. Right now, he's seen as a pain in somebody's tail end.
I think if you don't give people something to complain about, they'll make something up. That's the bottom line with that. Ready to move on?
Yep.
Oh, you broke it.
Somebody is always going to have some kind of complaint about anything you do.
Oh, yeah. Especially if you make something like Systemd that's got its fingers, its tentacles into so many different parts of the system. People are not going to be comfortable with that because reasons.
Well, the whole thing is all a question of purity, that it doesn't fit the Linux concept. They're trying to lump everything.
The Unix philosophy.
Enough of that nonsense already.
Yeah. Yeah. In Linux, as in politics, purity is a downside. Anyhow, let's talk about our innards somewhere, shall we, Joe?
There's that systemd might not fit the Unix philosophy, but Linux is not. Sorry, systemd might not fit the Unix philosophy, but Linux is not Unix, so it doesn't necessarily have to, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to our Linux innards. Now, we chose our Linux innards this time because, well, we had been hoping for an interview, but that didn't pan out for this time. So we're going with an alternate. And so what we decided to cover was our individual subscription services, anything based on recurring payments, streaming, email, storage, VPNs, etc., and also some of the alternatives that we use in order to not have to pay a monthly subscription fee. Bill, you are up first because you have the most.
Oh, I knew I had a problem. I'll admit it.
And that's the first step.
You get sucked into the. My name's Bill, and I'm addicted to online services. And if you saw this list, yeah.
You'll hear it in just a second.
Oh my gosh. So when I had been thinking for some time, I need to sit down and compile a list of all these things so that I can take a good long look and decide, do I really need all this stuff? And so I did that. And as I make this list, it is considerable, but I don't really see anything on here that I am willing to part with. So I'm just going to.
I'll have some suggestions when you get towards the end of the list, because I think there are a couple of things that you could do that would provide the same services, but provides them for free.
Yeah. Well,
that's legal.
I'll get, some of that for me is, well, I'll talk more about that, but some of the reason for a few of these is to support a project, that I think it deserves the financial support, but anyway, I've got two lists, one list considerably larger than the other, and that's the one that has all my paid services, and it reads as follows. Okay, starting off, of course, with Netflix, and I'm not even going to break it down because there's no way I'm going to get rid of that and still be able to stay married. And Amazon Prime, I get a lot of use out of that. And there's a lot of shows that we watch on Prime, the 2-day shipping. And since I live 3 blocks away from a distribution center, what do they call it? A fulfillment center. Sometimes I'll order something at 10 o'clock in the morning and I'll have it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You need I say more? Hulu. The wife and kids use that a lot more than I do. The wife and I like Handmaid's Tale. I'm an old Dharma and Greg fan, and it's about the best place to get those shows. They'll put shows on there and then they don't delete them like Netflix does. Netflix will put a show on like Downton Abbey or something, and then they'll have it on there for 6 months, and then they'll just rip the rug out from under you. Disney Plus, I don't need to tell anybody why. We're all nerds. Disney Plus,
They have everything.
they got, I mean, that you could get by with that. Discovery Plus, I think I might be able to part with that because I originally went with that option. That I went that route because my daughter and I like to watch How It's Made on Sundays, and that's where you can get all of those episodes. But I can watch that on Philo on Sundays all day long.
Yeah. Now I know in your notes here it says your wife likes to watch the animal shows. Pluto.tv has a whole channel dedicated to animals.
Yeah, Pluto's actually on my free list at the bottom there. I watch Pluto when I'm on the road a lot on the phone.
Pluto works really well on phones and tablets, but on my screen I can't get enough of the directory, and it doesn't scroll well on the computer.
Really?
Have you tried Curiosity Stream?
Yeah, I forgot about that. That was a good one for documentaries and things.
And if you do
That's great. I'm trying to get rid of stuff, Norbert.
If you do your research and looking up different services that can be made available, check out Hypnotics. It's built into Mint.
Yeah, I use that too.
Yeah, okay.
I've actually got Hypnotics installed on my Arch machines too, because all of these cool Arch tools are in the AUR. The two of which most notable is the web apps management tool, which is fantastic for making progressive web apps with either Firefox or Chrome or whatever you got installed.
You are a perfect candidate for torrenting. That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
Let's let Bill read his list.
Anyway, I got Paramount Plus.
You could, if you want to do torrenting, you could consider moving to Eastern Europe.
Well, I don't need that. I've got 2 VPN services, and ask Moss how big my Jellyfin server is. That's
about
all I'm
the
going to
same
say about
size as
that.
Joe's Plex.
Yeah. I got Paramount Plus for the Star Trek shows, basically. And isn't that where the Halo show is, I think?
Yes, it is.
And yeah, so we got that for that. HBO Max, we had that for Game of Thrones. The wife and I have a show on there called The Gilded Age that we watch, and then Raised by Wolves. Now,
Would
Philo,
you recommend The Gilded Age? I've seen that it started airing.
if you like period dramas like Downton Abbey and things like that, that's kind of right, because it's made by the guy that makes Downton Abbey. What's his name? My brain's blank right now.
I haven't watched a lot of them. Period dramas.
You got to be into that. If you're not into those, then you're going to be bored to tears, because this is basically late 19th century New York City period drama type thing, which is.
And a lot of shows on HBO Max are also carried on other services like Amazon Prime and Hulu.
Yeah, if you want them new, though, you got to get them straight from the source. Philo is Philo, I cannot say enough good things about Philo. Philo is a streaming TV service comparable to like Sling or I don't know what's another one. Hulu's got its own TV service, and you've got YouTube TV. The thing about Philo, though, it's $25 a month, and I don't mean $25 plus hidden fees. I mean what comes off of your card every month is $25, and it's basically your whole cable TV lineup, including your Discovery Channel and all the. I think there's almost 100 channels on there of all the stuff that you're not going to get any other way, or that you don't want to pay for individually. So I've been using them for years. They're fantastic. The only problem with them is that they don't make an app for WebOS, like for TVs, for smart TVs, which is not a problem for me because I don't care much for smart TV interfaces. I always use some kind of device. And in the case of the TV upstairs, we've got a NVIDIA Shield on that. And then the TV in the bedroom is got Amazon Fire built into it. The same with the kids' TVs. They've got Fire built into those. And so you can get the app for devices like that, but you can't get it for a smart TV. Whereas services like YouTube TV or Hulu, then obviously there's an app for those. Okay, so that's my streaming TV services. Now I've got 2 VPN services listed here right now, and the reason is I've switched to Mozilla VPN. For one thing, well, I've been using Trust.zone for a lot of years because they were recommended by Torrent Freak several years back. I am a big torrent person. That's all I've got to say about that. I share a lot of torrents, and I've been using that Trust Zone for a lot of years, and I've never had one of those nasty warning letters from my ISP.
I have.
Why Mozilla and not Movad?
Because Mozilla makes Firefox, and I want them to keep making Firefox. And I want to support a company like that.
In the past, you've probably heard about my VPN setup if you've listened to the show for a while. So, it's pretty solid. But the thing is that the torrent, because I've gotten like 3 or 4 notices, and it's all for the exact same torrent. Whenever I would restart my modem, for some reason, they would send me another notification that blah, 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 next one, we're locking you down, whatever. And I wasn't the one that downloaded it. Somebody else was in my household on my network did it. So
yeah, I take a couple of extra measures to make sure that nothing is going to leak out.
Me too.
I said I bind interfaces, I bind IP addresses, I use kill switches. My experience has been good. Now I'm switching to Mozilla VPN, and we're going to see how that goes. Another good thing about Mozilla VPN is they have a client for Linux, and it's based on WireGuard, which is good. Now, Trust.zone can run on either WireGuard or OpenVPN, but they don't have an official client. You have to go and download all of the WireGuard config files. Not a big deal, but it's kind of a second-class citizen way of doing it because you're basically just downloading those configs, throwing them into the /etc/WireGuard directory, and then using a WG quick command to connect to the VPN that way, which fine for somebody like me, but my wife is not going to. Now you can set up Network Manager on the desktop to go ahead and connect that way. That's a lot of faffing around. We were doing that for a number of years, but when Mozilla came out, I thought, well, this is a proper open source company. that I would like to support. So we went ahead and went that route. And I still have I've still got 2 months left on my trust zone on the subscription, because you pay for that 3 months at a time. And if I have any kind of problems with Mozilla, then, I've still got a backup. The thing about Mozilla too, it's not in the default repos yet. So you have to add a PPA for it, which, yeah, whatever, no big deal. It's not the easiest way to install something, but on Arch, there's no binary at all. And that is a behemoth of a thing to compile, because the only way to get it on Arch is through the AUR. It takes a good 15 minutes to compile that sucker. So I'm hoping that changes in the future. I imagine it will. Okay, so moving on from that, I have ABC Mouse that I pay for, and that's just, we'll probably be moving away from that in the near future, but that's educational software that my daughter uses on her laptop and on her tablet. I can't say enough nice things about that too. That is educational software that I'm not sure if it's made by people at PBS or if it's just backed by PBS, but that's where you hear a lot of talk about it. And it literally, my daughter was having a little bit of trouble with reading and a couple of other things, and ABC Mouse had her sorted within a couple of months, actually, of really buckling down and using it. So that's been useful, but that might be something we can get away from. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. As far as value goes for a service, that Xbox Game Pass is probably the most valuable service out there, because what that gives you is basically full access to the Xbox game library. It's like if you could pay Steam $20 a month and just have unlimited access to their entire library of games, and you just pay them a fee. That's basically what Xbox Game Pass is. Windows only, of course, as you could probably imagine, but that's not something all that important to the kids, and they get quite a bit of value out of that. That's not going anywhere. Big Fish Games. Big Fish Games that's a game hosting thing that has those silly little games like the hidden object and stuff like that the wife likes to play. And we used to get those from torrents too, and they would actually even install on Wine and run perfectly well on Linux. But when we started doing a little better financially, I decided, if we can pay for these things, I will. I'm not
Help out when you can.
Yes, and it took a while to get the wife around to that way of thinking, but eventually you have to
give back.
You got to give back, because
Quit being a leech.
If you just honestly cannot afford something and you can figure out a way to use it, then you can debate whether or not that's ethical. But if you have the ability to pay, then it's good to help out when you can. And Big Fish Games it's $7.99 a month, and you get some pretty hefty discounts on the games. And then once you have the game, you have it. But they're little like puzzle type games, hidden object. They're fun. The wife really enjoys them. But we might get away from that too, because she tends to play most of her games on her phone these days, and there's no shortage of free Android games that are doing what God knows what terrible data harvesting in the background. Tutanota email. Now, here's one that I choose to pay for because another one that I believe in the project. That for those that don't know, that's one of the only two verifiable end-to-end encrypted privacy-focused email providers, period.
The
in
other
the
one
world.
being Proton.
Proton, yeah. When I was turned on to the Tutanota project through Destination Linux, and I tried both of them out, and Tutanota just kind of I couldn't tell you at this point why I chose Tutanota over Proton, because I do have Proton accounts, but Tutanota is the only one that I'm paying for right now. And like I said, I couldn't tell you. I think it might have been because Tutanota had an official desktop client, whereas Proton didn't. I'm not sure how important that really is. In fact, I don't even have it installed anymore, but that might have been part of the reason. Google domains. I think I have 3 or 4 domains on there between the accounts. I've actually, between the 3FT podcast, 3ftpodcast.org domain, and then the mintCast domain. No, we got that on Namecheap. I probably should have put that on the list because I paid for that last time. Between Dave and I, we've got about 3 dozen domains registered that have the words 3 Fat Truckers in it, just to keep people from getting them. We want the whole Google search page to come up with us. I've got some on GoDaddy too, which I think I would like to switch everything up. Moss wrote down here, Namecheap is a lot cheaper. GoDaddy, I've got some domains on there from way back that I've just kind of kept going for a long time. And since I've learned about Namecheap, I'd probably want to move them over. I just haven't gotten around to doing that yet. I don't like having my stuff fragmented all over the place. If I can get everything on Namecheap, that seems to be the most well-regarded domain registrar among
I know we had some problems moving our website to Namecheap, but the domain moves easily. There's no problem with that.
Well, we never did get the website to work. I don't know what I did wrong there, but I ended up just going with a $5 Linode, and that works perfect. I didn't go with the one. Yeah, that's another thing. Linode. I've got a couple of VPSs that I pay for, one of which being the mintCast web server. Linode's got this thing, they boast the one-click apps, but I tried to go that route with the WordPress, expecting that, okay, if you got a one-click WordPress, then you just set that up and then bam, you got WordPress, but you don't. Or at least I couldn't find it. You still have to download WordPress and install it. So the only thing I could think of is it's got all of the necessary PHP modules and all of the right Apache modules that you would need for WordPress, and then you still got to go and download it. But it wasn't clear on that. So I ended up just setting up a generic Ubuntu server and built it from scratch, and then moved over with a couple of the WordPress plugins. So that was built from the ground up from scratch. But Linode, I can tell you right now, a lot of people like DigitalOcean. Linode is pretty much all Linux all the time. And I appreciate that for pretty much for that reason above all else. Okay, so Bitwarden. Earlier, Moss was talking about building a Bitwarden server, and yeah, that gets a little bit involved. I think you've got the concept of a database you've got to have on there, like a MariaDB or something like that. It's probably somewhat akin to setting up a Nextcloud server, where yeah, it's great and all, but and I could have probably done it with one of my Pis here, but this was another one that I could throw them $10 a year and just have them deal with it and support an open source project. And Bitwarden is truly open source and, you know, worthy of the support that we could give to it.
Yeah,
And so
$10 a year. What is that?
that's nothing. And they're handling everything for you. And Bitwarden, yeah, we're not getting paid by them, but it's true that they do all of their auditing, and they hire third-party auditors to come in and check their code and check their infrastructure and all that to make sure that everything is up and up. And this, you know, you've got software for every platform out there, including the phones, and you've got browser plugins for
And they
every
do
browser.
sponsor other open source podcasts on top of that.
They do. Almost all of them that I can think of are being sponsored by Bitwarden. Okay, so Apple Podcasts. So we all have to pay homage to the god of podcast. We do, and don't get yourself in trouble, Moss. They're going to send goons after you. It's called podcasts, by the way. No, but you gotta, if you're gonna,
So
if you're
they'll
gonna
send the pod people after
they
me.
will send their goons, and they're gonna kneecap you, bruh. If you want on the Apple platform, you gotta pay homage, and it's not free. So I pay a monthly fee to Apple, whatever they call it, content creators platform, whatever they call it, for the Three Fat Truckers. Although I don't know what I'm getting out of that, because the only thing they're doing is getting the RSS feed from my podcast hosting and distribution on Red Circle, and then just like every other service. So I don't know what value I'm getting for that money, but it's literally the only one that's charging me anything. GitHub. I've got a few projects on GitHub that I sponsor just a few bucks to every month, including Pi-hole, Nextcloud, and Video Ninja. Video Ninja is a software that we use to make our shows, and we had an interview with the lead developer a couple of shows ago. I probably ought to have the show number, but I don't. Fantastic software. About the best. A lot of people are using it. They're just not talking about it. And I can say that Destination Linux is using it, and even Jupiter Broadcasting is using it. I now know, because I've heard them start to talk about it recently. And so, yeah, I throw them a few dollars. Trucker Path. This one's probably the one that if I got rid of, or if somehow it wasn't working, I would have some real difficulties in my day-to-day work life, because this is an Android app that handles truck routing. It tells me where the best fuel prices along my routes will be, which is huge, because from one state to the next, I could end up spending, like, for example, New York for a gallon of diesel can be up over $6 a gallon, whereas in Pennsylvania or Ohio, it's down closer to $5 a gallon. And when you're driving a machine for 700 miles a day at about 7 miles to the gallon, it matters, because every time I fuel up, you're looking at between $700 and $1,000 every time I fill the tank. So having that information telling me where I can get the fuel the cheapest along my route is really useful. It also tells me it tells me what way stations are open. In the United States, along the interstate highways, we're regulated as to how heavy the vehicle can be, and that's broken down into how many tons you're allowed to have per axle. And they set up these way stations along the highways, and they're ran by the state police or some other agency, depending on the state. And they open and close rather randomly, actually. Just they're open when they're open, and this app will tell me whether they're open. So if I've got a situation for one reason or another where I feel like I need to dodge that scale house, if I need to take a route to go around it because I might just be overweight, then I'll know that they're open. And the way that works is this app is running on your phone, and it's connected to your GPS, and when you go past the way station, it knows you're there near the way station, and it'll ask you, is it open? So it's because it's such a prolific app among truck drivers, it's got enough guys connected to it that are feeding information into it that it knows, and it can tell you, hey, this person just 10 minutes ago announced that it was closed, or this person 5 minutes ago said it was open. And the app actually even builds trend models based on that information. Just that same method is applied to truck stops and parking as well. When you get to a truck stop, it'll ask you, how's the parking? And then you can say that there's lots of parking, there's some parking, or they're full. And then that displays on the app for the driver too, so that we know where we're going to find parking. And then when you have the paid service, it actually it's got an algorithm that through the trend models, it comes up with ways of predicting by the time you get there. It can predict the parking situation, whether there'll be lots of parking or if it'll probably be full, because it's usually full this time of day by the time you get there. So I get a lot of use out of that app. And that one is $18.99 a year, which in my mind, that's nothing. And it also has like GPS navigation built into it. It's not the best, but it's good in that it's built for truck routing, because we're not allowed on every road that a car is allowed on. And it'll keep you from ending up on a road where you might be stuck under a low bridge or something like that. So that's a useful one. So yeah, as I was compiling this list, it struck me how staggering all of this was. I suppose you're looking all in all, it's about $180 a month for all of these things put together, which it is what it is. I might sit down, like I said, the VPN, I'm going to have that down to just one service before long. That'll be one thing. But like I said, I don't see anything on here other than switching my domains over to Namecheap, maybe saving a few bucks, and then maybe getting rid of the Big Fish Games. I know that there's ways of getting these things for free. Discovery Plus, yeah, I'll probably get rid of that, but I don't know. Some of these shows, I might be able to navigate the nuances of, being able to find this show over here and this show over here, but getting the family to do that all week long while I'm on the road, that's another thing altogether. There is a few things I do use that are free. Proton Mail. I feel I'm conflicted about how I'm dealing with Proton right now, because I've got it. I've got it and I use it. I don't use it as much as like Tutanota or even Gmail for that matter. But that is a proper project that deserves people supporting it as well too. So I'm kind of conflicted as to whether I should go ahead and pay for a service with them. Pluto is good enough in my mind of an option, especially if you're using an app on a smart TV or on a Fire device. I believe my parents could have gotten by
Yeah.
with something
I
like that.
I did want to mention that if you know any like older person that's looking
Yeah.
for a TV service that reminds them of cable back in the
Yeah.
day when the TV guide used to scroll by and you could pick what you wanted to watch, this is about as close as you're going to get. Pluto TV.
And Pluto, I think of my dad when I think of Pluto, because all he ever wanted to watch was Westerns. And Pluto's literally got channels on there. That's all they are, is Western movies and Western TV shows. And he could have got by with that.
A lot of Walker, Texas Ranger on Pluto.
Oh yeah, God's sakes. Murder, She Wrote and Matlock and all that stuff. Tubi is interesting. Tubi is kind of like, it kind of looks to me like what Netflix would look like if it was free. It's got a interface.
If you like really, really horrible movies, and I like really horrible movies, Tubi is a great place to find terrible movies.
It is, and you'll have a lot of. There's also the what Freevee, I think is what it's called. It used to be IMDb TV. I think they changed the name of it to Freevee, which is kind of the same thing. But these services are basically kind of second run, or I would say fourth or fifth run movies, that date back as far as you can imagine.
70s, 60s.
Yeah.
If you like terrible old kung fu flicks.
Oh yeah, if you're into kung fu flicks, these services got it down. You just have to watch an ad or two here and there, but
kaiju flicks.
Oh yeah.
Giant robot flicks, lots and lots of those.
Yep. And it's got an interface that it really kind of reminds me of Netflix, basically. But like I said, Pluto, I can't say enough nice things about. Okay, so Red Circle. Red Circle is a service I use to host and distribute Three Fat Truckers.
Also, before you get too far into Red Circle, I want to mention you might want to try something like DTube, which is basically a decentralized version of YouTube. So if a video is popular, that makes it more accessible. It's just something to look into.
Yeah. I use I've got NewPipe on my phone and my tablet that I use for YouTube, which is good because you can download the show on your Wi-Fi and then watch it at your leisure without using your data, and it works really good.
I used to use YouTube Vanced, but that got bricked. So
the thing about NewPipe is it gets updated a lot, and I use the version that you get from GitHub, because they almost can't keep up with the constantly changing APIs that Google puts on their YouTube platform, which, to be fair, they've got to have an API out there so that it works on Firefox and different things, but they didn't mean for you to be able to write something like NewPipe and then have all this granular control like you do. But for anybody that's not aware, NewPipe is the way to handle YouTube if you watch a lot of it on the go, because you can download it and then watch it later, and if you can use it to stream, and you have control over the stream itself to a point where you can tell it don't go any higher than 360p or something like that.
Well, there used to be a lot of desktop tools that did the exact same thing, but they slowly got taken down over time. I mean, it was great being able to, say, buffer the whole video back in the day. when you were working on a really low bandwidth connection, and then you could just, go to the video, hit pause, let the whole thing buffer, and then not have to worry about, halfway through the video not being able to continue on with it.
It's just something that's always going to be a situation where you've got to be aggressive with your development, because you're constantly going to have to retool around Google changing the goalpost. Anyway, like I said, moving on. Red Circle. Red Circle is the service I use to distribute 3 Fat Truckers. Okay, so when I first set up 3 Fat Truckers, I knew nothing about how to put together RSS feeds, how to build one and point it towards the file, and then distribute that to the different platforms. I had not learned how the mintCast website worked, the plugin, the WordPress plugin that we use to point the RSS feed towards our MP3 files. I didn't know how to do that at the time, so I just went with a service. And Red Circle is the best, as far as I can tell, service if you're just going to start one show and you need a free service to host the files, generate the RSS for you, and distribute the show to all of the different platforms. They do that for you, and you can embed their audio player into your website. And as long as you've only got one show, you can get the free account, and you get some metrics that go along with that. You can tell who's watching the show and where, what devices they're using, what software they're using. To some degree, you can't tell like what people are doing with the MP3 once they're downloading it. You can kind of see that you've got this number of people have downloaded in this area, but they also distribute to all of the platforms like Spotify and Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. You gotta connect it to your Apple Podcasts account, and the same with the Google. But they handle spreading it to Spotify and Pandora and all that. Now they've got paid tiers where you get more value. As if you was to put out more than one show, you would need to get a paid tier. They're not that much, and you do get quite a bit of value. We will probably switch to something like that in the future once we cease to be a zero income show, which is the goal. I'm going to tell you right now, if I could retire from trucking and make podcasts down here in my basement every day for the rest of my life, by the time you got the words out, I'd be down here taking the stuff out of my truck.
I might be there with you.
Yeah.
If it were possible.
It seems doable. Now, my buddy Dave that I make 3 Fat Truckers with has been working diligently to try to put some things together, but you've got people making podcasts about one example.
Everything.
Yeah. And
Everything.
as long as you're willing to have ads, some of these ads will pay $1,000 per episode per ad, depending. And I mean, it's all sort of hinged on the number of listeners you get, the number of downloads you get. So you kind of have to establish
And how
yourself.
long the ad is. And
Yeah. So if you're putting out one show a week at $1,000 per ad, and you put 2 ads on the show, $2,000. I mean, it's something nice to think about. I would like it to be a reality, and well, more on that later, I suppose. Watch this space. Yeah, I was feeling kind of silly when I made this list because there's a lot of stuff on there, but the more I think about it, the value we get for these services is pretty good, I think, individually. Because of all of these services, the only ones that are really expensive is like Netflix is about $20 for the 4K service, which I would argue 1080p is plenty. but the difference between the 1080p and the 4K service is only a couple of bucks. So we left it on the 4K.
It's like when you go to the cinema and there's the medium popcorn menu and then the large, and there's barely any difference in price. So you wanted the large one, but you will get it anyway because it's a better
I know no
value.
such thing.
I guarantee you that if I get the large, I
It's
am
going down my
eating
neck.
that large.
Okay,
So
fair. I
you
do
can't
too, but I
use
might not.
food analogies with fat people. That just doesn't work.
But
I get
I'm
what
also,
you're saying though.
but I'm
Yeah.
also fat. So
Well, you're
and
holding it well.
I'm also fat, and I guess I do eat the large popcorn, but I might not drink the large soda.
Yeah, you can do without that. That's where, well, I used to sneak beer into the theater, but whatever. Um, yeah, Discovery
Tortilla
Plus
chips.
maybe I can do without, but I'm getting the value out of this that I want. And as far as these TV services go, this is the thing we wanted back in the day when we were paying for cable. Okay. We wanted
I agree with you. We wanted it piecemeal. We wanted to be able to pick and choose
yeah.
and only get the things that we wanted. But that was when everything was based on channels and it all just came at you through a fire hose and there was 10 million channels that you didn't watch that you had to pay for.
Right.
Now, because everything is basically the DVR model, it's all recorded and you can double click on it and it's all there. So all of that stuff that you don't watch, you're still paying for when you're with these services. So you're still getting that old model, but now you are getting the whole piecemeal. So you can pick and choose the services, but when one thing's good over here, one thing's good over there, one thing's good over there, you're still paying for all the whole catalog instead of the individual things.
Thing you can do with such services is that you could rotate between them. So 2 months of Netflix and 2 months of HBO when you know that something's on,
Well,
something will be on that you will want to watch. Then 2 months of Prime.
I
all
used
our
to go to my
cord
grandma's
cutters.
house. I remember when I was a kid, I'd go to my grandma's house one week. There'd be a cable box sitting on top of the TV. And then I'd go over there 2 weeks later and the cable box would be gone. I'd go back over there a month later, be a cable box on top of the TV. She would get it until she couldn't pay for it and then have it turned off and come get the box and she'd have it turned back on. It was maddening. But that's how she did my whole childhood.
All your people that were really, really happy to be cord cutters, and I'm sure like all of us probably, and most of the people listening really happy to be cord cutters, are going to once again be happy when all this stuff gets bundled at lower prices again.
That's hard to imagine though, because these are so many different
Companies.
studios.
But if you can get another company like a cable company, what the cable companies did, that goes out and gets deals from each of these services
and then
and then
aggregates
turns
it
around.
somehow.
Yeah. So
I feel
it's
like
full
we
circle.
would be sold packages again,
Exactly.
where we would still end up with something we didn't want in order
But
to get these things that we did.
that type of package would be perfect for like you, considering how many services you pay for.
Yeah.
If it saves you money and you only get like one more service that you don't use, I'm sure you're not going to complain.
Yeah, because I mean, technically, I am paying way more when you add all of this to what I'm paying for internet service, which I'm going to try to get taken out of my taxes. We'll see how that
Music
goes.
music streaming is in a lot better shape because when you subscribe to Apple Music or
Crap,
Spotify or
Pandora.
Tidal,
Yeah.
you will have like
Sorry.
90% of what you want to listen to on any one of those because they don't have much exclusive content. But at the as soon as companies like Amazon and HBO and Netflix started uh, making their own exclusive streaming shows, you can't get anything anywhere. And it's just a nice thought if you could just go to any one of these services and have 90% of all that you want to watch, because what the music labels do with these services is actually pretty nice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that is a
sorry.
completely different world, the music, because you can. I think you've just got less obstacles in the way of getting different studios to allow their content to be played on different platforms. Whereas with music, it's to their advantage somehow more to have music played on as many platforms as possible. Whereas with video, for some reason, you get the idea that it's not that way, or at least they don't think it is. But yeah, you saying that reminded me. I've been paying for Pandora since 2007 to get my music. That's probably, of the music providers, that's probably one of the older, more venerable methods to do it. But that's just how I've been getting it all this time. Yeah, like I said, I suppose this was the logical direction that technology would take technology would take us in terms of how we consume the content that we watch and listen to, because we wanted granularity, we wanted choice, but at the same time the companies that were going to offer us the choice wanted to benefit, or they wanted to cram as much stuff, they wanted to cram as much value for them into each one of those things that we were going to get, because they probably wouldn't make as much money if, like the analogy you described with the fire hose, if they just said, okay, we're just going to start charging X number of dollars per channel. Well, if they did that, people would probably only order 3 or 4 channels, and it would cost hardly anything, and it would probably be unsustainable from their point of view, I suppose, if I was to try to look at it from their angle. Which, to be fair, Netflix and all these platforms making their own shows, I do feel like the quality of these shows is better than anything we had prior to that. It seems like a little more effort goes into the creative side of making content rather than having the bean counters directly involved in the creative process. So,
and we're getting a lot of shows that haven't been picked up or have been canceled and needed to be picked up.
yeah,
We're getting a lot of high quality content that's not being run by the people running Hollywood.
yeah, and that's interesting too, because you get shows. I don't know. The Expanse is a good example of a show that was on Sci-Fi, and then they lost the budget for it or something like that. And Jeff Bezos is a big fan of the show, so he literally just bought it and started making it on Prime. That's one example of something like that, or you got a movie like The Lincoln Lawyer was a pretty good movie. I don't know, 10 years ago or so. Netflix has made an entire show out of that, and that's not the only one that they've done that with. And these shows are quality, and I can only imagine it's because they don't have to follow the same rules that Hollywood-based studios might have to follow. They don't have the same rules as to things they have to do for the FCC and all that, and so they're
like
able
Game
to.
of Thrones before they ran out of books.
Yeah.
Oh,
Netflix turned the Dark Crystal into a great series as well.
yeah.
And then
Well, there's several like Netflix shows that I really enjoy, including like Umbrella Academy,
Yeah.
Lupin, Sabrina. Well, Sabrina's done with. Lupin is ongoing. Umbrella Academy has one more season coming out. But I've really enjoyed all 3 of those. And that's just recent shows. They've also had, they took over Lucifer. When was it the CW that let Lucifer go?
I think so, yeah.
CW has almost gone all the way down now.
Well, CW is being purchased for free. They're like really far in debt. So the company that's taking them, and I can't remember the company off the top of my head right now, is getting CW for free, but taking on all the debt. So we'll see how it goes. I've liked most of their shows, but like Black Lightning was awesome. Only 2 seasons, which I really wish it had gone longer. But
Well, they were going to make a 3rd season with Painkiller, and then all of a sudden they're not.
right. And then well, Batwoman, that's gone. It was okay. Um Legends of Tomorrow, blah. Arrow, I don't know if it just ran too long. It got a little boring. It mostly did Batman storylines. Flash, yeah, that's pretty much been good throughout. But yeah, they got a lot of comic book stuff. I enjoy it.
Is it my turn yet?
Yeah, Moss, what do you got?
We're just going on and on about Bill's
when
stuff.
you
Yeah.
thought that when you thought that this was going to be a quick one, I thought,
Well,
I don't know.
Our lists just keep getting longer and longer, even while the show is going on. Mine, I started out with just what I was doing on TV, and now I'm doing everything I spend money on except my rent. Okay, in non-TV, I'm getting Xfinity Internet for $10 a month. Thank you, President Biden. It was $40 a month before the infrastructure bill passed. I'm getting Amazon on a low-income Prime membership for $4.95 a month. We're both getting Proton Mail. We are not paying for, excuse me, we are not paying for Proton VPN. Right now, they are giving us Proton Drive because it's in beta. We may have to pay for that later or not, depending on whether we decide to use it or not. We both have a diary at my-diary.org, and it's $3 for one or $5 for two, so we're paying the $5. We've got Surfshark, which is, well, we paid less than this when we signed up, but when we renew it, it's going to be $2.49 a month. You have to pay for 2 years at a time. We're probably going to renew despite the issues. Yeah, they disclosed that they were actually owned by a marketing company and have moved their headquarters to Finland instead of British Virgin Islands. And but so is everybody else except Molvat and Proton. Except for PIA, which in my opinion is worse. I'll let Joe talk about that. It was scheduled to expire in August, and they gave us an extra month for, quote, loyalty. I guess a lot of people canceled their memberships when they found out about the ownership. We pay Bitwarden. You can't beat $10 a year for password safety. I've got my website domains, which are peacefulhippo.info, triadbardic.org, and itsmoss.com, on Namecheap.com. They were originally on GoDaddy, but Namecheap gave me a much better deal. All our hosting is at purplepenguin.us. I won't tell you how much I'm paying for hosting. It's a secret. And then we get to my TV. We got Paramount Plus with Showtime. It's $19.95 a month. We get downloadability and we get local CBS, which otherwise we don't have local TV. We're out of range of just about anything, and it'd be a bad signal anyhow. So that gets us the Star Trek shows, CBS, Showtime. We went for Disney Plus, Hulu Plus, and ESPN Plus, which is another $19.95 a month. That gets us Star Wars, Marvel, Hulu shows. My wife in particular is a fan of Motherland Fort Salem. I call it something else, but this is a family show. And we watch a lot of old sitcoms, Dharma and Greg, Will and Grace, Just Shoot Me, Modern Family, a few others. I need to start making a list because we keep forgetting what we're watching. And some sports shows. When I really get bored or need to take a nap, I can put a baseball game on. The weird thing about Disney Plus is you have to use different websites for Disney and Hulu. It's not all consolidated into one website, and they have separate logins and even a little bit different software between the two sites. The free stuff I'm not paying for includes Peacock, which for some reason we can't get to play on our computer, but it'll work on our tablets. Amazon Prime Video is free with our Prime membership. Pluto TV, like I said, I can't really get the scheduling part of the screen to show up in my, maybe it's just the resolution I'm running. It's really not easy to thumb through, so we usually don't watch Pluto. Tubi, we watch a lot of old stuff on Tubi and a few movies that we can't find elsewhere. Mumble Mumble Joe's Plex, Mumble Bill's Jellyfin. And sometimes when we're really bored or remember that we're not watching anything and maybe want to watch something, there's always Hypnotics since we're running Mint.
Yeah, Hypnotics is one of those things that it's useful, but it's definitely not the easiest thing to use.
Yeah, you have to know what you're looking for to find it, and even then it's not easy. What I used to pay for when I was using Kodi with a plugin was Real to Brid, which is €4 a month or 16 euros for 180 days, which got me more streams and higher quality streams. And Track.tv, which it's free, but you have a premium version for 30 a year that gets you a few extra features, which keeps track of all your shows. So I'd go to my plugin, I could watch all my TV shows. I just have to get a stream that's working, and Track will keep track of where I am on all my shows. So it's just one channel, basically. And that was very convenient, but then I messed up and managed to wipe out my Kodi, and you can't find the plugins anymore because of the lawsuit in Canada. Anyhow, in addition to that, I make regular monthly donations to Bodhi Linux, Full Circle Magazine, Archive.org, and a few charities, the naming of which might get me slammed again for politics on the show. I see that someone down below me included their phone service. I use Ting Mobile. I got hooked into it years ago through Jupiter Broadcasting, and their prices keep getting cheaper. We're paying $10 per phone, 2 phones, free calling and text, $5 per gigabyte of data shared between both phones. If we had more than 2 phones, it'd be shared between all of them. Our average bill is around $35 a month for 2 phones, not times 2 phones. As a side discussion, Ting, along with Boost, Republic Wireless, and Gen Mobile, have been acquired by Dish Network to form the basis of Dish Wireless, but no merging has occurred yet, and no plans to do so are in place. The obstacle is T-Mobile, which appears to have reneged on many of the terms of the sale of Boost, which was done as an antitrust move in the merger of T-Mobile and Sprint. Dish has had to negotiate terms with AT&T, to pick up the CDMA side of the deal. So Dish has their hands full just with legal stuff and getting things in a row. It seems that Dish is spending itself to death trying to become a mobile carrier, and the outlook is not good long term. There are some rumors that AT&T just might buy Dish and get it over with, but that would lead to a monopoly problem in satellite TV service, as they already own DirecTV. In the meantime, we have a very expensive phone service for which we are grateful. We get great service. So both of us are on Verizon lines, so we've got the widest range, even if we don't always have the best coverage. I mean, we got great coverage, not always full bars.
Now, this is taking it back towards the beginning where you started, but why mydiary.org when you can use something like Standard Notes, Evernote, Simple Note?
Well, I started using a diary program a long time ago, and it was supposed to be free forever, and then they announced they were closing. I looked around for something else. I found something else. I could transfer all my old files to that something else. And then they decided to close. And so we found mydiary.org, which is hosted out of either Belgium or Netherlands. And he said it was going to be free forever, and that was great. And again, I could transfer all my files. So I have all my diary files back to when I first started doing a diary online. And I don't think I knew about Standard Notes back then. And he has started to have some financial problems, and so we say, yeah, we're going to give him some money to keep it going because it's really worth it. I can at any time get a zip file of everything I have posted and either keep it in a note file or move it to another site or whatever. So it's really great. He has provided a great service for us. He sends daily reminders on my in my email saying, yeah, have you done your diary today? And so that's nice because I do forget things that I don't actually have a habit of doing. I've gotten a lot better at doing it without the nags, but it's a good service. And they also have some diaries. You have the option of having it private or public. And he also now has a poetry site that he's trying to get going. And you can treat it like a social platform if you want to go read through the public diaries and comment on them.
Cool. Okay. Norbert?
Well, I already mentioned music streaming, and I think the very first service I ever paid for was Spotify, from which a few years ago I switched to Tidal. And Spotify had, I think, 99.9% of everything I want to listen to. Tidal only has 99% of it, but I grew to like its interface and app a lot more. I mainly use it on my phone, and on my phone I mainly use it on my phone, and I mainly use my phone to listening to stuff. And recently, I'm making an effort to consume more long form content as opposed to short form content, like podcasts, and even on YouTube, I look for channels that have longer essay type videos that I can just listen to. And I currently have the Tidal Hi-Fi uh, option, which is the lossless version, but it costs twice as but it does cost twice as much as the regular one. I do get 50% off of that via a student subscription though, which uh, which is nice. And I will probably still use Tidal after I don't have a student subscription because I I like their playlists. I even like their music discovery feature, which I didn't expect. Spotify, I think, has very advanced algorithms for recommending music to you, but I found that Tidal is not far behind, and I just like the ecosystem more. The next thing, I do pay for Google Drive for mainly photos, but other files that I store there, and I just have 100 GB version. I might upgrade to a bigger one, maybe to 1 GB one. I'm all for degoogling one's life, but in some cases, it's just too convenient to not uh, to not use Google services. And while I'm on that topic, I do also pay for Google Premium. I've actually never tried any alternative Google app, YouTube app like YouTube Advanced, and uh, and I also didn't really use any ad blockers, but I found that. And at one point, I just decided to try Google. And at one point, I just decided to try YouTube Premium. I really like the absence of ads, as well as the background playback. So sometimes I just use it to listen to videos, like if I was listening to a podcast. I do have Netflix, and it luckily has the show that I'm currently rewatching, which is Better Call Saul, and I also plan to rewatch Breaking Bad after that, and that's also Netflix as well. Netflix is still the most well-known subscription streaming service where I live. Well, the services tend to arrive here a bit late. For example, we only got Disney Plus launched this year, only a month ago in June, in fact. I don't plan to subscribe to it. For now, I'm fine with Netflix. but I did actually decide to pay for ProtonMail, and I only just switched to ProtonMail, and I decided to go and try to pay their paid model right out of the gate. And I like how you can have up to 10 email addresses. And one of the main reasons I considered moving to Proton is whenever we do our housekeeping, and I hear how Moss has an email that is just at pm.me. I really like that. I wanted to have a new professional email that I can use in resumes and for important contacts that is as short as possible. And this is something that really appealed to me, to be able to have an at pm.me address. I know you can do this with the free version. I might just switch back to the free version, but what I wanted to explore are all the options that the paid version has, and it's not that expensive.
Let me backtrack just a minute, Norbert. Disney Plus has Star Wars, Star Trek, and Marvel. And
yes,
for the
yes, I recently looked up the total runtime. I recently calculated the total runtime of all the classic Star Trek shows from the 60s to 2005, and it's over 600 hours. And considering how I'm still making my way through Doctor Who, I really think I shouldn't get into Star Trek anytime soon. I'm having sort of a fallout with Marvel, but I do plan, like previously mentioned, I do plan to watch through all of the canon Star Wars content. So I may, whenever I get around to doing that, I may try Google Plus. Sorry, with Disney Plus. There's too many services with plus in their name. And last but not least, my VPN of choice. I've been a subscriber of the Windscribe VPN. I've been using Windscribe as my VPN for about 5 years now, and I've been satisfied with it. It's not as well known as far as I've seen, but I like how they have a Linux client, and they have a way to create a custom plan. Basically, they do have some free to use servers. They do have premium servers, but you can create a custom plan where you pick and choose various premium servers that you want to use, so you don't have to pay to have all the servers available when you're just going to use like a handful of them. And they also have something called Robert, which I think is a built-in way to control what you want to block, like ads and trackers and stuff.
And they have not done a security audit according to the latest reviews.
Well, I don't know.
I'm sure they have the best free plan out there, but the speeds are a little below average. They don't have live chat support, and they have not done a security audit.
You must have to get a PPA for the client or something because I don't see it.
It's just on their website. You download the app file.
Oh, okay.
Or an RPM. They have a deprecated CLI client, which I actually prefer, but now they have a graphical client,
And it's
which is
wire
open. Yeah, and they which they open source. So previously the CLI client wasn't open source, but now the graphical client is open source. I have no complaints. I know if I look, there are probably more privacy conscious choices, but for now I'm content with this one. I might try something like Malward in the future, but I don't really, at this point I don't really plan to switch. I have used Crunchyroll before, which is a subscription streaming service for anime, which it was a few years ago. I think that was around the time where they had a bit of a problem with bit rates and quality. I haven't really revisited it since then, and until not long ago, I also had the monthly recurring payments on Patreon. I'm currently stop that, but I do plan to continue it when I'm in a bit better financial position, which is hopefully later this year or early next year. And I recently actually went through this idea of the topic came to me when I went through and decided to compile all the list and compile a list of all the subscription services I'm using. And that was the point when I decided to cancel a couple of them too, because I didn't really calculate how much I was spending on this. And I think the most important ones that I really don't plan to part with ever or anytime soon at least are Tidal and my VPN, and maybe also YouTube, maybe YouTube Premium, because I don't really want to use YouTube with ad blocker. I feel like it's, at least it gives me peace of mind that I know that when any creator I watch, I can I can give back this way without having to see ads. But yeah, something like Patreon is obviously a much better way to properly support someone. And yeah, I think that's all I have here. Joe?
Okay. Well, I subscribe to as little as possible because I don't want the extra monthly expenses. I do pay for Prime because I like next day delivery, and that also gets me Prime Video, which I do sometimes use, but it feels like the quality coming off of Prime Video, like the streaming quality, just isn't that great. So I'll watch it. I mean,
Well,
the new Reacher show was pretty good.
I think overall, if you look at the bitrate of most of the streaming services, like if you download something like a 1 hour long episode in full HD on Netflix in a Netflix app, the file sizes are surprisingly small.
Heavy compression, yeah. But yeah, and like Moss says, it's actually cheaper than paying for shipping if you do a lot of ordering from Amazon. So yeah, having Prime, I'm going to continue having it, and it's something I think is worth the cost. And then I do still have Netflix. And I do use Netflix on occasion, as do my kids. So, but I get that through T-Mobile, which pays for most of the cost. Now the price has gone up since I initially got the plan. The price of Netflix has gone up, but that still means I'm paying like $5 a month, and that's automatic through my T-Mobile bill. And then I pay for PIA VPN. Yeah, I know they got bought, and the people that bought them, uh, not the most scrupled of individuals, but I have not yet seen any proof that they are logging. And as far as I know, they're still not logging. So until it's a problem, I'm going to stick with them, mostly because a lot of my automation is set up with PIA in mind. But like I use it every day, especially when I go to the office on my phones. If I'm out of the house, it's on. But yes, I also have a VPN set up at my house, but PIA gives me more options for locations and more options for higher speeds.
Well, they are the people who wrote the program that hacked the previously thought to be unhackable iPhone.
I'm okay
So
with that.
the fact that we don't know that they're logging, it's Israeli Secret Service and military. I don't know. Yeah, we wouldn't know that they're logging until they knock on the door,
If you haven't done anything wrong, Moss, you've got nothing to worry about.
Then why do you need a PIA VPN?
To protect yourself. But no, like I said, I'm going to trust them for now in regards to PIA. Until I am shown otherwise, I have to assume that the trust is there. That it would be the same thing if I switched to any other VPN service. I would still have the question: are they logging? Is there something better? What else could I do? And like I said, I'm all set up to use PIA. So for now, I'm sticking with them until they are proven non-trustworthy. Now for my internet, I figured I'd toss this in there because I simply don't have a lot of services I pay for. I do get the higher speed plan from Spectrum, so that's like 300 down and 20 up. If we get fiber in my neighborhood ever, and get that whole what is it, gigabit Ethernet up and down, then yeah, I'll probably make a switch. Until then, I'm sticking with Spectrum. They keep sending me, ads for this is exclusive to you. Please switch your plan, and we'll give you slower internet, but we'll also give you cable. And it's like, no, why would I do that? So you can charge me more. No thanks. So I'll be sticking with Spectrum and their high speed internet plan, and I'll probably never have cable again, even if it comes bundled with a bunch of other things. And I
Right.
did, yeah,
Xfinity was real slow to get around to offering cheap internet, and for quite a while, it cost more to get just internet than it costs to get cable with internet.
yeah,
They come around, and we got into the low income plan at 40, and then President Biden lowered it for us further.
Going
Yeah.
back to the cinema popcorn analogy, this is exactly like the internet is the popcorn, and the cable and headline line are the drink and whatever you get with the menu.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think I've watched TV much in like almost 10 years.
Not the old-fashioned
cable.
way, no.
Yeah. Now, I did want to mention T-Mobile because I don't just have T-Mobile. I have add-ons with T-Mobile, and that includes the Netflix and also like international calling. And it comes out to a really great price on my monthly phone costs because I'm a veteran. I have 4 lines, 2 of them insured at like $20 a month a piece on that, and then the international calling, the Netflix, and it comes out to like $160 a month, which is $40 per line. But like I said, all those add-ons, and that's just unlimited internet, and I use a lot of internet when I'm on the go because my phone is always doing something in the background. So, well, because I have it doing something, not just the reporting back to Google that it does, but the stuff that I have it doing. But yeah, so I'm really happy with T-Mobile. I've had them for 20 years now, and yeah, I am on an older veterans plan that allows me to have everything at a much lower price, and I'll probably keep my kids on it as long as possible, as long as they keep giving me the lower price for it. And then a couple of the things that I have set up so that I don't have to pay for other things is like Plex. The only thing I wish it had was for like my audio collection. I wish it had playback speed adjustment, but you can't have everything. But it is really easy for my entire collection to be available to me from my phone, from wherever I'm at, from Florida when I'm visiting my dad. I can just log in. It's all right there. I have complete control over it, and I can watch whatever I have in my system. And then recently, Plex has gotten together with Crackle, which is owned by Sony, which is a free service. I've used Crackle for a very long time. I think since it first came out. It's also a really good place for some TV shows and movies, and actually really good, not new movies usually. But it's a good place to go and check it out. And because it's integrated with Plex, if it's on there, all I have to do is search in the Plex menu, and it comes right up. And then, like, I've used Google Voice since Google Voice first started its beta. I got a number back then. I've had it the whole time. I've used it the whole time. Yeah, it bugs me that they dropped it from Hangouts and they're taking functionality away from that number. But I can't really complain too much because it has been free, and what am I going to do? It's Google. We know we take that chance.
I've had that since the beginning too, and I've often that's the number I use if I've got to give somebody a phone number and I don't want them to have my cell phone number. I give them that because you've got real good control over blocking people with it too.
Yeah,
So,
and it was always great back when people were writing things for it, and not so much anymore. But for like group text messages or something like that, being able to do it from a computer and add people, remove people, and get that all sent out to everyone for a mass notification, it was great for that.
yeah.
And that's all I got, unless you guys want to add something to there. It is getting to be a long show, though.
Yeah, we're at 2 hours and 54 minutes.
Hmm.
So let's move to
Oh,
vibrations.
all right. Moving on to vibrations from the ether. Okay, I'm going to butcher this name again, and
Probably Josue or Josue, depending on what country he's from.
Josue de Mota. Um, we've gotten an email from him before, and he says, "Hi, Joe. I am giving a quick follow up with our last conversation. I was looking online for job postings when I found an IT ops manager position available. After some back and forths and 2 months of waiting, I won the job posting, and I am not only going to increase my total income by 38%, but I am also getting to play with Linux." Awesome. The company
Getting
that
paid to play with Linux, he
right,
said.
I love that that
What's
phrasing.
that like?
That sounds like the phrasing that I would use. The company that I will be working for asked me to deploy 350 plus desktop users from Windows 10 to Linux Mint, since 100% of their operation is web based. I am also going to be maintaining an Ubuntu server where they have deployed Nextcloud and other open source applications. I will be honest with you, this sounds like my dream job. Mine too.
Yeah.
I
Not
have
the
been
only
playing.
one, no.
Yeah,
Gosh.
I've been playing with Linux since I was 16 years old, and now being able to do this makes me really happy.
Of course,
Regarding the MacBook
tell us
Pro
how old he
laptop,
is now.
right. Regarding the MacBook Pro laptop, I am selling it for sure and using the money to buy a decent Lenovo ThinkPad or Dell Latitude. Any suggestions? Thanks for reading me, and thanks for the show. And I love to hear on my commutes. Okay, and I did respond to this guy, and I said congratulations on the job, and I was happy to hear it. And my recommendation is Dell. Dells are awesome for installing Linux, and it works really well. And if you can get a Dell Latitude, get a Dell Latitude. But that's my opinion. Moss says, go ahead.
Moss says you can just load Linux on your Mac, but I'm a huge fan of
Eh.
ThinkPads. You
Well,
don't even need a new machine. You can find good 2016 ThinkPads for around 400 to 450 with an i7 and 16 gigs or more of RAM and an SSD. At present, I don't know anything about newer than 2016, so if you find a good deal, let me know. As far as Dell Latitudes, I have never found a good keyboard on a Dell.
well, I always use external keyboards. So, but as to the Mac, he actually in the previous conversation mentioned that he had an M1, and yes, you can load Linux on there, but
Oh, yeah, you
definitely
can.
incomplete.
It's in beta still.
Yeah, it's
I
very
definitely
not
wouldn't want to
daily
have to
driver.
rely on it for work. Yeah. I have
Well,
to
I have a
second
T460 I'm very happy with.
I have to second Joe's motion on the Dell. Dell seems to be I get Linux working on almost anything. I've got Dells, I've got HPs, Lenovo's, Acers, Asus's, and Linux seems to work on all that stuff. But Dell seems to be the one that doesn't give me weird error messages that I can't figure out anything about. So do make of that what you will. That
I
being
said it
said,
wrong. Yeah.
what's that?
I said it wrong. I don't have a T460. I have a T560.
Potato, potato. So,
More than an inch of real estate on the screen.
oh,
That's an important inch too.
they're all important.
Okay, and that's it for our vibrations from the ether. Everybody, please send us some emails. We love reading them on the show. We love answering things on the show. We always enjoy it. And moving on to check this out. Norbert?
First, I want to ask: have I talked about this before on the show?
I don't remember you
I don't
ever
recall
talking
it.
about PhotoGimp.
Okay. So PhotoGimp is basically a set of configurations that you can put into your GIMP config folder, and it tries to mimic the workflow of Photoshop inside of GIMP. For example, changing the layout to resemble Photoshop a bit more, and change a bunch of key bindings shortcuts to their Photoshop counterparts, or at least those that have Photoshop counterparts. And I've been using GIMP more and more lately, and I started to get used to some of the key bindings, but I still do use Photoshop mainly on my desktop. And since I on Windows, and because I don't want to have Windows on my laptop, but I want to have a more efficient workflow in GIMP, I found this to be a very helpful way to do that. I know a lot of people who use GIMP would argue that GIMP has more sensible shortcuts, and so to an extent, I do agree. But the problem is that I've gotten used to the Photoshop shortcuts too much, and for me personally, this is a very helpful tool to have. You can install this for either the Flatpak of GIMP or the native package, and yeah, I just wanted to put this out there because this is a very interesting project that I found, and I
So
really like it.
you have to add this to an already installed GIMP.
Yeah,
This is
you have GIMP installed, and this is something that you put into your inside your home directory in your .config/GIMP/ there.
oh, well, that's actually
So it's
kind of cool. Right on. Link in the show notes, folks.
Okay, and on to our housekeeping and announcements. Thank you for listening to this episode of mintCast. If you see something that you'd like to hear about, tell us. Send us email at mintcast@mintcast.org. Join us live on YouTube. Post at the mintcast subreddit. Chat with us on Telegram, Discord, Facebook, or post directly at https://mintcast.org. Our next episode is at 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Sunday, July 24th, 2022. And there's a link in the show notes to get that converted to your time zone. Our next live stream will be 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, July 16th, 2022. And you can also get that converted to your time zone or join us on Discord and be a part of that live stream for only $391.5. Our next live stream will be at 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, July 30th, 2022. Live stream information is at mintcast.org/livestream. On to the wrap up. If you like the sound of my voice, you can catch me on a couple of my other podcasts. I'm on the Linux Link Tech Show, which you can get to at tllts.org. I'm on the Linux Lugcast, which is at linuxlugcast.com. You can email me directly, jb@mintcast.org. I do try to answer every single email, and I do have a Ko-fi link in the show notes if you want to donate to me. Moss, how about you?
Well, you can hear me on my other podcasts, Full Circle Weekly News every week, Distro Hoppers Digest every month. My email is bardmoss@pm.me, and all my other information can be found at itsmoss.com. Bill?
You can email me, bill@mintcast.org. I'm Bill_H on Discord. I'm at WC Hauser3 on Twitter and WC Hauser3 on Facebook. Also, check out my podcast, Three Fat Truckers. The website for that is 3ftpodcast.org. We basically, that show comes out opposite of this show, so every fortnight. Norbert?
you can send me an email at norbert@mintcast.org. And Nishant couldn't be here with us today, but you can send him an email at nishant@mintcast.org. He's Recon Ghost on Instagram, Recon Ghost at GitHub, Ghost.recon on Discord, and Maverick00783 on Steam.
Okay, and before we leave, we want to make sure to acknowledge some of the people who make mintCast possible. Our team of audio editors, including Norbert Londoner, Tony Hughes, and others. We continue to need volunteers for our audio editing. Please contact us. Bill Hauser and Josh Lowe for their work on the website, and Bill Hauser for hosting the Linode, which runs our website. Hobstar for our logo, InitRD for the animated Discord logo, Londoner for our time sinks, archive.org for hosting our audio files, and the Linux Mint development team for the fine distro we love to talk about.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Slim.
Slim. And that's a wrap.